Hi, I'm Patton Oswalt, and welcome to Duolingo's DuoCon 2021. I'm holed up at the world-famous New Beverly Cinema in Los Angeles, where I've spent many hours hiding from reality over the years. DuoCon's back as a fully virtual event this year for completely understandable and totally avoidable reasons. The internet is awash in bad information, and maybe it always has been, and it makes Duolingo's commitment to educate the world all the more important. I wanted our future to be right out of Star Trek, and I guess I kind of got what I wanted. We certainly have a lot of people acting like red shirts. The internet has revolutionized communication, and that's simultaneously empowering and soul crushing. But I have faith that we'll always choose the right path. Anyway, when adversity made our lives smaller, some of us rose to the occasion. Bo Burnham put his voice to good use to make Inside. Seth Rogen made bongs disguised as Mother's Day vases. Florence Pugh cooked. Stanley Tucci taught us to make cocktails. And what did all of them have in common? They were broadcasting something important inside of them that needed to be shared. Communication is necessary to evolve. That's why I'm hosting DuoCon. Every impediment we remove to communication brings the world closer together. Metaphorically. So let's all keep a safe distance for just a while longer. Language is always changing and evolving, so whether you're discovering words in a language you've mastered or languages to try and conquer, today's DuoCon is meant to encourage and inspire you to find new mountains to climb. Okay, you're going to hear a lot today from talented folks from Duolingo about what they've spent the last year working on, and we've invited some special guests to share the stage. And as an exclusive for today's stream, we'll also be sharing a conversation between co-founder and CEO of Duolingo, Louise van Ahn, and host of The Daily Show, Trevor Noah. As a reminder, all our talks today are in English, unless you're the very special person that I'm communicating with telepathically. For everyone else, Spanish and Portuguese subtitles will be up later today. All right, up first, we have Edwin and Angela from Duolingo sharing some new features coming to Duolingo Plus, followed by a phenomenal talk from our friend Dr. Jesse Greaser on language and belonging. All right, on with the show.
Hello, my name is Edwin, and I'm a product manager at Duolingo.
Hi, I'm Angela, a product designer at Duolingo.
And together, we work on Duolingo Plus, our premium subscription in the Duolingo Learning app. We're so excited to be here with you today to introduce a few new features coming to your app soon. But first, we want to set a little bit of context. What is Duolingo Plus? Well, Duolingo Plus is the most efficient, personalized, and fun way to learn a language on Duolingo. And while all of our learning content is available for free, Plus is packed with premium features. These features are designed to help you maximize your time on Duolingo and have a more seamless and efficient language learning experience. And before we introduce anything new today, we just want to set a little bit of context with our 5 core features. First, Duolingo Plus removes all the ads from your app, allowing you to learn without interruptions. Second, Duolingo Plus gives you unlimited hearts, so there are no limits to the number of mistakes you can make as you work through new lessons. Third, Duolingo Plus gives you unlimited test outs. Imagine you're breezing through level 1 of the travel skill, and you decide you're ready to move on to harder content. Well, take a test out and jump right on up to level 2 so you can keep working through that harder content. Fourth, Duolingo Plus gives you Mastery Quiz. And Mastery Quizzes are short quizzes that allow you to track your progress in your language course over time. And finally, Duolingo Plus gives you the added insurance of streak repair. Learning a language requires a dedication every day, and that's why we design our streak to keep you coming back day after day. With Duolingo Plus, if you want to take a break and you need to repair your streak, you can always do that with the added insurance of streak repair.
In addition to those 5 core features, we're continuously trying new things to improve the Plus experience and focus on developing features that make learning more efficient, personalized, and fun. Today, we'll walk you through our process for creating new features on Plus and introduce 2 new ones. So, how do we come up with new features? It's simple. We listen to all of you, our learners. Our goal is to develop the best education in the world and make it universally available. And the best way to improve the learning experience is to listen to all of the people who use Duolingo the most, which is all of you. So a lot of our ideas for new features and improvements come from talking to you all through interviews or reading your reviews. Today, we're really excited to introduce 2 new features on Plus that we've been working really hard on. So first up, we heard from a lot of learners that they want to see more information about their weak areas and exactly what they should focus on. Currently, we have a ton of learning content on Duolingo, with each course having hundreds of challenges and exercises, but learners want to know exactly what they should focus on, where and why they're struggling, so that they can make fewer mistakes. Introducing Mistakes Inbox, where you can review all of your mistakes in one place. So we know that mistakes happen to everyone. It's part of the learning process, and reviewing your mistakes allows you to learn and improve faster. Now, when you make mistakes in a lesson, we'll automatically save all of those mistakes in one place so that you can review them at your own convenience. On the right side of your home screen, you'll see a broken heart icon with a red label that keeps track of the number of mistakes that you have. Just tap on the icon to open up your mistakes inbox, where you can review all the mistakes that you have and start a lesson to practice them again. When you start a mistakes lesson, you'll be able to practice the exact questions you previously got wrong and earn XP while doing so. And finally, when you answer a question correctly, it will be cleared from your inbox, and once you finish reviewing all of your mistakes inbox icon will transform from a broken heart to a shiny gold one to indicate that you've cleared all your mistakes and you're ready to move on. So just keep learning, and you can always come back later to practice as you make more progress.
With Mistakes Inbox, Duolingo Plus becomes a more efficient and personalized learning experience. By bundling all of your mistakes into one convenient place, learners can tackle all of their weakest areas efficiently and move on to learning new language content. But we didn't want to stop there at just a more efficient and personalized experience. We know that language learning is inherently difficult, and keeping you motivated is a big part of what we do at Duolingo. So we set out to make Duolingo Plus more fun. We pull a lot of inspiration from mobile and video games when we try to gamify the language experience for users like you. And one game mechanic that we really love is a boss battle. Learners will end up working through lots of content until finally they're met with this extra difficult challenge with a really compelling reward at the end. And we found this really nice parallel with what you had been asking for in some of our research sessions. First off, learners want to prove that they've mastered their skill content. And second, learners are up for a challenge. And learners especially want a nice reward when they do complete a challenge like a boss battle. I'm very happy to introduce Legendary Level, a 6th and final level for each of your language skills to help you prove your mastery of your language content. Our course today on Duolingo is structured into small skills, which are bundles of similar language vocabulary and grammar concepts, such as food, travel, or family. And as you progress in the course from level 0 to level 5, your skill will gradually turn gold, which indicates that you've learned all of the new vocabulary and grammar concepts in that skill. But we wanted to go one step further, which is to add a 6th and final lesson to help you display that you've mastered the content in that skill. So, introducing Legendary Level. On the left, you'll see a skill that's at level 5, and it's gold. And if you tap on Legendary at the bottom of the screen, you'll be brought to the screen on the right, where you can prove you're a legend. On these challenges, we're only going to let you make 3 mistakes, and we're going to remove all of the hints. Additionally, we're going to pack this lesson with tons of hard content, actually picked by one of our artificial intelligence systems to make this challenge unique to you. If you beat all the challenges in the Legendary Level, your skill will turn legendary. And slowly, it'll make your entire tree start to sparkle. We are so excited to see a lot of our language learners turning their entire language courses legendary, and we hope you're up to the challenge too. We focused a lot on turning Duolingo Plus into a more efficient, personalized, and fun language experience. And we hope you're just as excited as us to jump in and use these new features in your app today.
So to recap, we've added in 2 new features to Plus in addition to our 5 core features, and you can get all of these today with our monthly or annual Plus subscription plans. However, we still haven't touched upon one fundamental element of language learning, and that is that language learning is better together. The purpose of language is to be able to understand and communicate with others, whether it's traveling to a new city, broadening your education and work opportunities, or calling your grandparents. And we believe Plus should be accessible for not only you, but also all of your loved ones. So we're really excited to introduce Family Plan, which is our newest group plan on Plus. And now you can get 6 Plus accounts under one easy and affordable plan. So, how does this work? When you start a Family Plan, you'll be able to add members through your Plus dashboard. It's really easy to invite anyone. Just send them an invitation through text, email, or whatever messaging platform that you use. You can also directly add accounts on shared devices. For example, parents who share a family iPad with their kids will automatically show all of the accounts on your device, so you can just directly add them to your Family Plan. And finally, you can manage and follow your family members to see how they're learning and keep each other motivated. Everyone is welcome to our Family Plan. We wanted to be as inclusive as possible when creating this plan, so there's no restrictions on who you can invite. Whether it's your child, friends, your friendly neighbor, or even a neighborhood bear, you can learn together on Duolingo Plus with your chosen family group.
Today, we have over 1.9 million learners on Duolingo Plus. And because friends and family can now share the cost of Duolingo Plus across their groups, we hope this now makes Plus even more accessible for all of our millions of learners across the globe. A huge thank you to all of our learners, and especially our Plus subscribers, for all of your support. You make it possible for us to deliver free, high-quality language education to millions around the world. And for that, we thank you.
Here's a situation you found yourself in, I promise. Somebody said something you didn't understand, or maybe you told an in-joke that somebody else didn't understand. Somebody had an accent that was unfamiliar to you, or someone misunderstood something that you said as being some other word. A lot of the time, we think of language as being the thing that we use to communicate ideas to other people. I tell you thing A, you understand. You tell me thing B, I understand. Language use, done, right? Wrong. Language does so much more than that. Language itself is all about belonging. What communities are we a part of? How do we show that we're a part of them? My name is Jessie Grieser. I'm an associate professor of English linguistics at the University of Tennessee. I'm also the author of a book coming out next February, The Black Side of the River: Race, Language, and Belonging in Washington, D.C. And today I want to talk to you about that last word, belonging. How does our language let us belong? There are a bunch of ways that belonging matters to how we use language. For starters, community is how we get language to begin with, and language is how we do community, how we show what kinds of groups we're a part of. We also use language to show who belongs as part of our group and who doesn't. And as we use language to indicate how we're a part of community or not, we end up changing the language in ways that are permanent and that get picked up by other people, sometimes people who aren't part of our group. And that means that we have to be aware of what kinds of groups are setting themselves apart with language and why some of those groups are valued more than others. See, language at its core is about who we are and how we signal where we belong. When you think about a language community, you might think, okay, all the people who speak the same language. And you're exactly right. That's one very big language community. And it's really clear that that's a language community. If I show up in Turkey on a layover, which I have, I'm pretty much done for. I don't speak that language or any language like it. I can't do much more than say hi at the airport, and I can only do that if somebody teaches me when I get off the plane. I'm definitely not a part of the Turkish community. So that's a huge language group to which I don't belong. And belonging happens at that big, language-wide level. People use language to make distinctions at those huge levels, but they also do it at smaller and smaller and smaller levels. sometimes levels that are only a few people or a few hundred people at a time. What do I mean? Well, here's one of my communities. I was in the athletic bands, mostly the marching band, at the University of Michigan, where I got my undergrad degree. Go Blue. And if you were in the athletic bands, you got exposed to all the cheers, not only for football, but for basketball and hockey as well. Now, our hockey cheers at Michigan, well, they're not always very nice. I'll admit it. We're pretty mean to the other team, or at least we try to be. And one way we do that is with a cheer where we point at our goalie and yell, "Goalie!" And then we point at the other team's goalie and yell, "Sieve!" Yeah, sieve. Like the thing you pat flour through when you're baking. Get it? It's full of holes. Everything goes through it, like the other team's goalie lets the puck go through. But here's the part that makes this a language community. People who are in the marching band, even if they weren't in the hockey band, start to use sieve to mean everything falls through you. Lost your dorm key? You're a sieve. Forgot you were supposed to turn in your homework? You're a sieve. But it only works inside that one community. If I turn to someone at work and go, "Oh no, I locked my keys in my office. I'm such a sieve," they think of the baking tool and they don't understand why I'm using that word. But if I say that to my Michigan band friends, even 20 years later, they know exactly what I mean. Language helps us create community, even if it's a small community like 400 members of a marching band. And it's also how we do the communities we're a part of. When I call myself a sieve, I'm connecting myself to all the other people in the band. Not just the people who were in school with me, but even the people who are in the band now. Sometimes it's a much bigger group that we want to signal our belonging to. I'm a Northerner. I'm from the Midwest states of Ohio and Michigan. But 6 years ago, I moved to the South for work. There are a lot of differences between Northern and Southern English, and a lot of similarities too. I want to sound like I belong, but I also don't want to sound fake. And so the thing I picked up, well, it's something that belongs to another community I'm a part of, the African American community. Many African Americans in the US use African American language features at least some of the time. It's a pattern grammar and sound system that's unique to the US African American community. And because the US African American community has its roots in the enslavement of Africans in the South, there's a lot of overlap between that and Southern English. And one of those is the word y'all. I didn't grow up saying y'all because I'm from the North and most of my groups that I hung out with were white people. But when I moved to the South, well, it slid into my vocabulary with quickness because I can use it to connect myself to being Black, and it also helps me seem just a little bit Southern. Language is something we do to show that we're connected to other people. And it's also how we show who doesn't get to be part of our group. You might recognize the girls in this picture. They're from the movie Mean Girls. On Wednesdays, they wear pink, and they say that things are so fetch. And they also spend a lot of time policing who gets to be in their group and who doesn't. I studied a group of women on the internet that I named the Mean Girls because they used the Mean Girls to represent their group. They were actually a bunch of fan fiction readers, and their goal was to, well, be mean. The language practice in the group was to make fun of the stories that other people were reading. It wasn't any particular wording or any particular sound. I mean, it was online, there was no sound. But the way you showed you were a part was by what you said. And it turns out that if you weren't sufficiently making fun of a story that everyone else was making fun of, or heaven forbid you said you liked it, well, the members of the group would slowly start to mock you until you didn't want to be part of the group anymore. Just like the Mean Girls from the movie, the internet Mean Girls had a burn book, and the way you stayed out of it was to participate in their language practice. But that's online and this is real life, right? Well, except for the part where you're online right now watching me. Where do we draw the line? But okay, let's talk about people who aren't typing out their thoughts. These are people from another community, the community of Anacostia in Washington, D.C. They all go to the same important church in that neighborhood. It's an almost all Black neighborhood, and when people in that neighborhood use language together, they use it to signal that they're a part of that group. Sometimes that looks like talking about us versus them in a way that makes us all the Black people in DC, and sometimes all Black people, period, and them, everybody else. Sometimes that looks like anticipating that someone else is going to think that their neighborhood is ugly. And so instead, talking first about how it's rural and how it's pretty. And sometimes that looks like strategic use of that variety I talked about before. African American language. Like when one of my interviewees complained about a new streetcar by telling me, "They done had them trolley tracks laid down for 2 years. I haven't seen no trolley car run yet." That "done had" and that "haven't seen no trolley car," those were ways at the sentence level she was able to authenticate that she was a Black person using Black language in a Black neighborhood. She belongs, and the people building the trolley car, well, they don't. We use language to belong to the groups that we're a part of at every single level of language. It's in the words we use, it's in the way our accents sound, or the grammar of the dialect we speak. It's in the entire languages we pick for one situation over another. And while we're all out here as speakers trying to belong, well, all that belonging, it's changing the language. Here's an example of how we're changing the language. You might have heard that, oh, accents are getting less. We're all watching TV, and so we're all going to end up sounding alike. Well, turns out people are people, and we like to belong. One place that people belong is in the northern cities. The cities like Detroit, Michigan, and Cleveland, Ohio, and Buffalo, New York, and Madison, Wisconsin. And there's a sound change happening up there. It makes a word like desk sound like dusk, and a word like bag sound like biag. Now, I didn't always have this vowel shift. I grew up at the bottom of Ohio. But like I said before, I went to the University of Michigan, and I love that I went there. And I love that I lived there. And somehow when I lived there and I wanted to show that I loved being from Michigan, well, I started saying biag. And I didn't even notice until I moved away and had a part-time job as a cashier, and people didn't know what I was asking them about. Do you need a biag? This is a belonging you might not even notice if you're from this area. But it's happening. And as people try to belong, their vowels and their language come with them. Pretty cool, huh? Here's another person who's had a sound shift. In African American language, one of the things that the grammar absolutely permits is not pronouncing the t or the d sound at the end of a word. So something like west side gets to be west side. And this is pretty unremarkable. Linguists see it, but the people who use it might just think, oh, it's cool, or oh, it's urban, or oh, it's Black. But not every Black person wants to sound that way, or at least not all the time. What I've found is that a lot of middle-class Black people have been taught a lot of messages about how they should sound. Things like enunciate or pronounce your endings. A lot of people I've interviewed have even said that at Howard University, which is a historically Black university in Washington, D.C., they taught diction classes until recently. More on why that matters later. But what that leads to? Well, part of being middle-class Black is really pronouncing your endings. Sometimes so far that it's actually different than the ending that was there. Maybe saying something like, I went to bed, instead of I went to bed. And as more people do this, the more hanging on to those endings becomes part of sounding like you belong to the Black middle and upper class. Now, I haven't studied exactly how much Michelle Obama specifically does this, but when I bought her audiobook a couple years ago, I couldn't listen to it. I love her voice, but I kept unconsciously trying to study it. I just read the paper version instead. My point, though, is that she belongs, and you can hear it in her voice. And it's not always about sound either. If you're a proficient internet user, you might know that these days you can express that you're excited or upset or overwhelmed by slamming your hands on the keyboard in joy. But it can't just be any old slam. This top one, well, this is your cat walking across the keyboard, or if you have a baby, maybe it's your baby. The keys got smashed, but this isn't a key smash. This one, though, this one is acceptable. This one means I'm excited and not my cat just showed up. As you see other people doing this, you can start to learn that number 2 is right, and you can start to produce key smashes of your own. That's language change happening because we're trying to belong. Or you might recognize this one. Well, if you're any older than I am, you probably don't recognize this one. This means something like please, or that makes me feel all the feels. Someone puts something online that makes your heart melt, and if you know what you're doing, well, you'll respond with this. It's like the marching band. If you're part of some communities online, you know when and how to use this. But if you're new here, well, you might not. We use all kinds of language to show that we belong. It's at the biggest levels of choosing, do you speak English or Spanish? Do you use African American language or Midwestern white English? Do you have a t or a duh at the end of your words or not? Or do you instead have a really, really strong one? Do you make a grammatical key smash? Do you use the right emoji? It's this lovely thing where we get to just use our language to belong to the groups we want to belong to, right? Well, not all belongings are the same. We're people, and people do language, and we also do status. And some groups are given higher status by themselves or by their positions of authority or by really negative processes like racism and sexism. And a lot of the time, we don't notice. We just see a group who has a lot of status, and we see the language that they use to belong. And we think, that's the language of status, and I'm going to use that language to belong. A lot of the time, we obscure that the status language is the language of one kind of group by calling it the standard language or the academic language. By now, though, you're probably thinking, but everyone has their own language practices for the groups they belong to. And you're right. We call it standard. But just like everything else, it's the language practices of a specific group. And we have to look very carefully at who those people are. When we think of how to belong to a high status group with language, we have to ask ourselves, well, who gets to be a part of that group? If it's what teachers and professors sound like, or what rich business people sound like, well, who historically has been able to become a teacher or a professor? What groups have historically been able to have the money to become a rich business person? What races were they? What genders were they? Because when you exclude people from a group, you exclude their language as well. So the standard never gets to have other kinds of language in it. And when we finally let other people into the group, we expect that they're the ones who are going to change. Here's one final thing to think about. What happens when the language one group uses to belong gets used by people who don't belong? These words might look familiar to you, especially if you're a late millennial or a Gen Z. And they also might look familiar to you, well, if you're Black. All of these are part of African American language. Now, I started out by talking about how your language can let you belong in two groups at once. When I use y'all, I get to call on being a Black woman. But I also get to invoke a little bit of Southern, however inauthentically. So yes, it's true. These words do internet or young right now. They might show that you belong, that you're cool, you know how to use TikTok. I don't know how to use TikTok. But remember just before when we talked about how some groups get to have higher status and that when they do that, they exclude other people and their language? When there's a status differential and someone uses this language without being aware that it's the language of a group that didn't usually get high status and who might catch a lot of flack for the language that they use because they historically didn't have that high status, well, then these high status speakers are using this other language to signal belonging without having to take any of the effects of actually belonging. Now, I'm not going to dictate what you can and can't do. And language practice is always going to have multiple meanings. Being aware of those meanings, though, that's the right place to start. Because when we do, we can stop looking at one group as good and another group as bad. We can start to see the glorious mess that is all of us trying to use language to be people with one another. We can recognize the cool ways that language changes because of what we do as we're in community together. And we can open the language door so that more people belong. I hope that gives you a lot to think about. And if you'd like to think about it in my vicinity, you can find me on Twitter @JessGreaser or on the web at jessgreaser.com. And I hope you have a great time belonging with everyone else here at Duocon. Thank you.
I do believe that education is about belonging. Education for me, in a sense, is the most powerful weapon to free yourself. I am Alexandre Ribeiro, I'm 22 years old and I'm from Brazil. I'm not only Brazilian, but I'm a Brazilian from favela. And that means that I grew up in a place where violence, crime, police brutality were really surrounding me. Only 1% of the Brazilian population knows some English. And for me, it was really hard to even dream about it. I started working when I was 11, when my father died, and he was pushing me to education, education is the only way that we can transform our reality. Education is the only way that we can transform our society. But in that time, I didn't have money. And I started learning Duolingo step by step, just basic stuff. But at the same time, it gave me so much power, so much confidence to keep learning. Then I met my girlfriend, this lovely Mozambican German citizen. With my relationship, I was getting more confidence to talk in English and study more because I wanted to express the better version of me to her as well. Tschüss! Ich liebe dich. After that, I was just looking for some opportunities and I found Bard College Berlin. A beautiful thing to see that their homepage was 70% of our students got financial aid. So I enrolled myself. I fell in love. While I was preparing myself to the Duolingo English test to be accepted in my university, I was using Duolingo. And while I was studying for Test DAF, it's a German test for certificates, I was using Duolingo as well. What Duolingo does is a revolution act to share knowledge for free with people who need the knowledge. What's up, my family? How you doing?
Did you go visit Bard College already?
No, not yet. I'm going to. When I started to learn English, I got to start to learn the Black community history, like the Civil Rights Movement, the Black Panther Party. Through hip-hop, I got to understand all my roots. I was not learning English, I was learning my own history. When I'm here in Germany, I'm trying to understand the balance of it, trying to find the beauty of it, but at the same time not forgetting the past. Lindo, né? Falaram, graças a Deus. I think that language is this sense of understand humanity itself. My first language is Portuguese, and thanks to Duolingo, I speak German and English.
Hey! Welcome back and thanks for sticking around. Up next, we have two great talks. First, Chris from Duolingo is going to share how their learning app has become more effective at teaching character-based languages like Japanese and Korean. And after that, we've got our friend Gretchen McCulloch sharing her enthusiasm for linguistics and how understanding the building blocks of language can help you as you learn. Oh, we also have a few copies of Gretchen's book, Because Internet, to give away in the chat. So keep your eyes peeled. Let's check it out.
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm a software engineer and language learning enthusiast at our Duolingo office in Berlin, Germany. Today, I'm here to celebrate diversity in language and would love to take you on a whirlwind tour through some of the world's writing systems. Along the way, I will tell you about some of the new features we've been developing to help you learn them. As you know, Duolingo has always been a great way to learn languages such as Spanish, French, or German. If you're an English speaker, many aspects of these languages will be familiar to you. For example, even if you don't speak these languages at all, you'll still be able to recognize the letters in words and type them in your phone to look them up in a dictionary. However, Duolingo now teaches many languages such as Japanese, Korean, or Arabic, to just name a few that will feel much more different. Here, you can see common greetings in some of these languages. One thing they all have in common is that they use writing systems that are different from the letters used in English, Spanish, French, or German. This is only one of the aspects that makes learning these languages different, but it's an important one. So last year, we formed a new team dedicated to improving the learning experience in these kinds of courses. Today, I'm super happy to tell you about one of the improvements the team has been working on. To really understand what we've been up to though, let's take a closer look at some of these writing systems, starting with one of our most popular learning languages, Japanese. A Japanese sentence can be very different from an English sentence. If I wanted to write I am German in Japanese, this is what I might write. Did you notice that there aren't any spaces? And even more interestingly, this sentence actually uses characters from 3 different writing systems in Japanese, all mixed together. There's hiragana, which is the main writing system in Japanese. Each of its over 40 characters represents a syllable. Then there's katakana, which is mostly used for foreign loan words or emphasis. Each of its over 40 characters represents a syllable. And then there are kanji, which are adopted Chinese characters. There are thousands of kanji, each with 1 or more pronunciations and meanings. So, in order to read authentic Japanese text, you first have to learn these 3 writing systems and become comfortable reading text without any spaces. But don't worry, we've been working on a new feature to make this both digestible and fun. And here's how it works. There's a new tab in our Japanese course that will teach you 2 of the 3 writing systems, and rest assured, we're working on the 3rd. If you navigate to this tab, you will see reference charts containing all the characters along with their English readings. You can tap individual characters to hear how they sound, and there's also a big Learn the Characters button. If you tap it, you will be guided through a sequence of lessons created by our language experts. Like the regular Duolingo lessons we all know and love, these lessons are bite-sized, meaning that they only focus on a handful of characters at a time. You also get helpful tips on pronunciation and things to watch out for along the way. Additionally, we've built several new types of exercises, such as this tracing exercise, that will help you become more familiar with the shapes of the characters. As you go through the lessons, the characters you've learned will light up in the chart to indicate your progress. Once you're done with the chart, you will feel comfortable sounding out words in the writing system. This feature has been live on Android for a little while now. It is now also available on iPhone and iPad. We're also working on a web version. We started with Japanese because it's one of the hardest languages to learn how to read. It's also one of our most popular courses. But once we had this feature developed for Japanese, we wanted learners in other courses to benefit from it as well. Russian, Ukrainian, and Greek all use alphabets that are similar to the one used in English. But just like with English, it can be difficult to learn what pronunciations go with particular spellings. So, for these courses, we developed a new set of lessons specifically geared towards making this easier for our learners. Next, let's talk about Korean. As with English, a Korean word consists of 1 or more syllables. But Korean is unique in how it visually represents syllables. Individual letters come together to form syllable blocks. And what's interesting is that there are different syllable block patterns. For example, look at these 2 syllables. They both consist of a consonant plus a vowel. But notice how one is arranged horizontally and the other vertically. And there are even more patterns than just these 2. In order to effectively teach individual letters coming together to form syllable blocks, we devised a new exercise type that works just like a puzzle. You have to fit individual letters into the puzzle to form a syllable block. We think our learners in Korean will really enjoy this. And this is what it looks like in Korean. As with Japanese, you get reference charts, curated lessons, tips, and new exercise types. Next, let's talk about Hindi. Hindi is somewhat similar to Japanese in that individual characters usually represent a syllable. One thing that's characteristic for Hindi is that individual characters are joined by a horizontal line and neighboring characters visually connect or even merge. It looks stunning, but you need to learn to tell the characters apart. Fortunately, we're also bringing our new feature to this beautiful writing system. Next up, Arabic. In Arabic, which is read right to left, individual letters visually connect to form words. One thing that's interesting about Arabic is that the shape of a letter depends on its position in a word. The same letter might look different depending on whether it's shown by itself, at the beginning, the end, or in the middle of a word. This helps give Arabic its beautiful flowing aesthetic. You can see how in this example, the same Arabic letter changes its shape based on its position. What's also tricky is that vowels aren't traditionally written in Arabic, but might be indicated by little marks, like the A in this example. So you can tell that this magnificent writing system is fairly tricky to learn. But don't worry, our new feature is also coming to our Arabic course. I hope you will enjoy it as much as I am. Next, Hebrew. As with Arabic, Hebrew text is read right to left and uses small marks to indicate vowels. When native Hebrew speakers write in the language, these vowel markings are not usually written. When Hebrew speakers read a word without vowel markings, they use context to determine what word is intended. And if they know the word, they know how it's pronounced. If they read an unfamiliar word, they can look it up in a dictionary to find its pronunciation written with vowel markings. To address this for our Hebrew course, we're adding a set of lessons that teaches you how to read the language both with these vowel markings and then without them. I also have good news for learners in one of our newest courses, Yiddish. Like Arabic and Hebrew, Yiddish is also read right to left. The Yiddish writing system is related to Hebrew's, but unlike Hebrew, the markings for vowels are typically written, except in words of Hebrew origin. This can be confusing to newcomers to the language. Fortunately, our Yiddish course will have you covered. So, to recap, we talked about many of the world's languages and writing systems, each unique and beautiful in its own way. Now, you can learn them in a fun and effective way on Duolingo. Just look for the tab in one of these courses. Please stay tuned for further improvements in these and other courses. Thank you very much for your attention and enjoy the rest of your DuoCon 2021.
We are a mission-driven tech company where making a positive impact on others is fun and rewarding for you. We offer meaningful work, limitless opportunities, and access to brilliant minds. Come brighten your life and over 500 million more. Peek at our job openings at careers.duolingo.com.
Hi, I'm Gretchen McCulloch, and I'm an internet linguist. I'm the author of Because Internet, a book about internet language, and I co-host Lingthusiasm, a podcast that's enthusiastic about linguistics. I'm here to talk about how linguistics can help you learn a language. But first, what is language? We often think of language in terms of this dichotomy between written and spoken. The written side is formal, and the spoken side is informal. But this conflates two separate things. Is all speech really informal? I don't go home and talk to my dog like I'm giving a presentation. For one thing, dogs don't really have much appreciation for a finely crafted PowerPoint. And for another thing, I don't have a dog. But is all writing really formal? What if we split up these two properties, formality and format? What else could we put in the extra two spaces? For one thing, we'd have a spot for formal speech, like the kind I'm doing right now. You see on radio, TV, media, actors. And then we'd also have a spot for informal writing. That could be things like chat, texting, language people put on social media. Informal writing is things like key smash, things like you can't pronounce it. Well, okay, I just did, because apparently this is people's favorite part of the Because Internet audiobook, and I really wanted to give the people what they love. But the whole point is that it's written. And yet, surely it's not formal key smash. Formal styles of language are the kind that you learn in school. And this is just as true if you're learning a first language in school as a second or third language. You go to school to learn Shakespeare or essays, not to learn how to text your friends again. But the problem is, then you step out into the world and you're trying to interact with actual people outside a language class, if it's not the language in the rest of your community. And you're like, oh no, this is not what I prepared for. I've tried to learn languages in both apps and classrooms, and I've run into this same problem. I'm a linguist, and it was this puzzle, this gap between what I was putting down on the page in the classroom and what was, or more likely wasn't, coming out of my mouth when I was trying to carry on an actual normal conversation that made me want to find out more about how language works in general. I remember reading the front pages of my French-English dictionary when I was about 12, because first of all, we still had paper dictionaries back then, and second of all, I was extremely that kind of nerd. And having my mind blown that thou wasn't just a generic oldie-timey word, was actually singular and informal, like French tu. And you was originally just plural and then plural and formal and gradually just sort of took over everything. And I thought, okay, what else could I learn about my own language and other languages if I approached language like a linguist? Looking at language like a linguist often means looking at these informal areas, the parts that really tap into the subconscious aspects of language. So let's start with informal speech. The first thing to know about informal speech, and informal signing for that matter, is that it happens with our human bodies. When we produce sounds, we're basically manipulating a living meat clarinet. There is a mental image. And there are certain ways of moving our bodies, our lips, our tongues, our jaws, that are easier and more efficient than others. So if we think about a question like, why do C and G make so many different sounds in various languages? Why do we have a hard C and a soft C? We don't have hard P or soft W. So why these letters? In Latin, these two letters stood for only the k and g sounds. Sounds that are produced by pressing the back of your tongue up against the back of the roof of your mouth, just before it becomes your soft palate. You can try it. K, g. But if you think about the difference between how you say these two words, the k sound in these two words, ki, ku, ki, ku. With ki, your tongue is hitting the roof of your mouth a little bit further forward on your hard palate. And with ku, your tongue is hitting a little bit further back. And that's because of the vowels. E is more towards the middle of your mouth, and oo is further back. It's a little bit easier, a little bit more efficient to have your tongue already in position to say the vowel. When you multiply this tiny bit of efficiency across hundreds of years, generations of speakers, you get the k and g sounds diverging from themselves depending on which vowel comes next. So E and A pushing them a bit towards the front of the mouth, especially in the descendant languages of Latin. So you have French merci and Italian città and Spanish gente and Portuguese imaginar, and all of those are pushing the sound somewhere slightly different, but closer to the front of the mouth. This is a thing called palatalization. You're pushing certain sounds more towards the middle of your hard palate, where you make the E and the Y sound. And you actually get the same thing with more sounds, with T and D, S and Z. They can also get pulled towards the palate and made into sh and zh and ch and zh sounds. So English does this in words like nation or combinations like didje. Portuguese does this in words like universidade. Gaelic does this. Actually, all the Celtic languages do this. Russian does this. Tons of languages do it, and I'm not doing justice to any of them. But it's a really big phenomenon that happens all over the place. And then you get languages doing all sorts of shenanigans with spelling to make up for the fact that actually, well, sometimes you don't want to palatalize, and you do want to have a gi or a ki sound. So now you've got to add an H or an extra silent vowel like U, or change the C to a Q, or just somehow figure out a way to spell huge, which nobody really knows. And then what's even more fun is you get a language like English, which borrows in various words that are using different spelling conventions for whether you do or don't do something. Sometimes a sequence of GI is hard, as in give. Sometimes it's soft, as in ginger. And then you make up a new word based on an acronym. People end up all over the place when it comes to how to pronounce it. I'm not even going to say this word out loud. Don't at me. The second thing to know about informal speaking is that it happens between humans. Humans who create a conversation in real time by going back and forth with each other. Broadly speaking, there are two main styles of how we take turns in conversation, which are called high involvement and high considerateness. This is from the work of the linguist Deborah Tannen. High involvement versus high considerateness can show up between languages. So Italian speakers tend to be more high involvement, Finnish speakers or Japanese speakers tend to be more high considerateness, and even between regions of the same language. So within English, New Yorkers tend to be more high involvement, and Californians tend to be more high considerateness. High involvement conversation is like playing a game where you're trying to keep a balloon in the air. Each person's trying to gently tap the balloon as it begins to fall, long before it actually stops moving or hits the ground. The way you show you're engaged and interested in a high involvement conversation is by jumping right in, even overlapping by a few syllables, to show you're paying close attention. High considerateness conversation is like playing a game of catch. You toss a ball from one person to another, each person catches it, holds on to it, and then passes it on distinctly to another player. The way you show you're engaged in a high considerateness conversation is by giving each statement room to breathe, pausing and allowing a beat of silence before taking your own turn. Like all good dichotomies, high involvement versus high considerateness is actually a continuum. Unless you're really far at one end, you've probably met people who are more talkative than you, who don't let you get a word in edgewise, and also people who are less talkative, who make you feel like you're holding up the conversation all by yourself. And both cases can be tricky. So counterintuitively, Tannen's research suggests that the way to make things less awkward when you're talking with someone when your conversation style doesn't match is to do the thing that feels rude. So that means to interrupt, or to do what feels like interrupting, if someone isn't letting you get a word in edgewise, and to leave an awkward silence, or a silence that feels to you like it's awkward, if someone isn't saying anything. I'm going to say, picking just a handful of interesting things from linguistics was a real challenge for me, so I tried to pick a few things from Lingthusiasm that our listeners have responded to really strongly. There's also way more where this came from if you're interested. And it's not quite related, but Lingthusiasm listeners really liked this fact about the French accent circonflexe and how it indicates an S that was there historically but got lost. So pâté and paste are actually from the same root. So I just feel like I need to make sure that any French learners know about this one. Let's put speech down aside for a second and think about the other side of informal language, informal writing. So informal writing is often internet language, which, spoiler, I like so much that I wrote a whole book about it. But you can also find historical precedents like postcards and diaries. Sometimes informal writing is trying to represent informal speech more accurately. So in French, people often say or say instead of tu sais and je sais, and so you see that showing up on social media as well. Sometimes it's just trying to make things faster to write by abbreviating them. One of my favorite things you can do with informal writing is trying to represent not just what you're saying, but how you're saying it. There are tons of examples of this, but here are two of my favorites from Because Internet. One is repeating letters. So that's when you write a word like hey with lots of Y's to indicate that you want to say this sound for a longer period of time. And this is especially common in languages that use the Latin alphabet or that use alphabetic writing systems in general, where you repeat a letter of the alphabet. In languages that don't use the Latin alphabet, they often use a different symbol, and that's the tilde, this sort of wavy symbol, to indicate the same thing, the lengthened sound. So writing something like hey with tildes can indicate, okay, here's a way that I'm elongating this, but I'm not repeating letters of the alphabet. And this is carried over into some languages like Singlish and Tagalog that are influenced by Chinese and Japanese and Korean cultural exports, even though they still use the Latin alphabet. One of my favorite ways of conveying how you're saying something or how you're reacting to something online is by using various forms of digital laughter. And these are often sort of language or orthography specific. So you see a lot that are based on letter H, letter K, because ka, ha sound fairly similar. And then you see some fun ones like in Thai, where they use the number 5, 5, because the word for 5 is ha. So this makes sense immediately. And then in Japanese, they often use this www, which does not refer to a URL, but it's from warai, meaning laugh or smile. So that indicates laughter, and then there's a whole bunch of extended further things you can do with that. Informal writing involves so many facets of the same desire to be flexible with language, to make what you write correspond more closely to what's in your head and what's in your community, rather than to what's in a style book or a dictionary or an external authority. So if we return to our question from the beginning, what is language? I decided to try to answer this in true internet fashion. Yes, I consulted the oracle of the human id, stock photo sites. And what the stock photo sites say language is books. Okay, a couple blackboards, whiteboards, glasses that you read books with, but mostly books. The idea of language as a book, or as a sufficiently large quantity of books, isn't a fact, it's a metaphor. And it only dates back a few hundred years, back when big comprehensive dictionary projects started getting going. So Samuel Johnson's dictionary was in 1755, there were others in other languages around this period. And metaphors change. I mean, this was a generation of people who were also using steam engines as metaphors for the brain. Metaphors really need to change sometimes. Perhaps the biggest influence that the internet can have on language isn't just some fun words you can text to somebody. Like, that's great. But the internet can also be a new metaphor. Language is like the internet. It's a network, a web, an open source project, a participatory democracy. Language is a network. And what that means is that it can have the characteristics of a network. So if someone writes in the margins of a book, that's vandalism, that's anti-authoritarian. But when you add more sites to the internet, more links between sites, when you meet new people, when you say a sentence no one's ever said before, make up a new word, that makes the network better, deeper, richer. When you leave a book on a table, you expect it to look the same the next day. But when you leave the internet overnight, you don't expect to wake up to find that everyone stopped talking without you. Language keeps changing because it lives in the minds of living human beings. If language had to be transmitted the exact same way from one generation to the next, it would be brittle and fragile. It could be lost, the way a manuscript can be lost. But we've never met a society without language. If you throw a bunch of kids together, they'll reinvent language, even when the adults aren't giving it to them. And that's because we recreate language in our minds every generation. So when we think about what is language, what does it mean to learn a language, it's useful to step outside of this book metaphor and also think about what else can we get when we interact with people who are using language, when we think about the subconscious things we're doing using language, we think about the fact that we're all in a body and in a society that's using language. That's why I'm so into linguistics. Thanks for coming along to talk about linguistics. If you're looking for more internet linguistics, my book is Because Internet. If you're looking for more linguistics of all kinds, my podcast is Lingthusiasm. If you're looking for me in general, I tweet at GretchenA.McC, and my website is GretchenMcCulloch.com. Enjoy the rest of your DuoCon.
All right, we're taking a 10-minute intermission. I'm going to go refill my popcorn. I'm going to pound some red vines. I'm going to chug a Red Bull. I will see you here in 10 minutes. I'm going to be keyed up. Be ready.
Bonjour.
Well, the Duolingo English Test is a really important part of our mission to open up educational opportunities to everybody, really. In countries like mine, like Guatemala, it's extremely expensive and a huge hassle to get a certificate that you know English. That's why we're working on the Duolingo English Test.
Students had to actually travel to a testing center. Before that, they had to make an appointment to go to the testing center, which it was not easy. There was a limited seat availability. They have to pay $200 to $250 to actually get an appointment. And after that, they had to wait weeks for their scores.
It's just an extension of our company's mission. Our goal is to bring high-quality education to everybody in the world. The Duolingo English Test was a way to deliver a reliable, accessible, both geographically and technologically, as well as financially, to anybody in the world who had access to the internet.
The most rewarding part of our work is when we hear stories about how the Duolingo English Test made the difference in the student being able to pursue higher education. And now, thousands of institutions around the world accept the test as proof of English proficiency.
Thanks to the great technology and the really easy use of service that you provide, it takes a really big hurdle out of the path for them to submit their applications to universities across the United States.
With Duolingo English Test, I could take the exam at home, and that's why I got into my dream school, Stanford University.
What makes the Duolingo English Test special is the ecosystem for the whole assessment. We always aim for an efficient and optimized blend of subject matter expertise with artificial intelligence and machine learning. I feel that with Duolingo's strong social mission, we are actually contributing to a better planet, to a better world, and providing more opportunities for everyone.
In the last 5 years, you've managed to move the industry forward, and now the industry is really trying to catch up with you.
What the Duolingo English Test does is it makes a secure testing environment possible without having to go to a testing center. What technology allows us to do is bridge the gap between access and security. It's been designed to do that from the very first day.
I just took the test whenever I was ready, and it was just a very good experience. I got high score, and I applied to 40 universities, and I got 10 acceptances.
When we were starting Duolingo, I wanted to do something that would give equal access to education to everybody. Anybody, anywhere in the world who wants to get a certificate of how well they know English can do so at any time. They can just do it.
We are very lucky to have a team of people from all over the world, and that gives us this global team that they understand the needs of people that are non-native speakers as well, which is one of our core strengths.
The fact that I could take the test at the comfort of my own home and also at my own time made the test process so smooth.
I know so many students who were able to get into amazing schools, from Princeton to Dartmouth to Columbia. Thank you so much, and congratulations and happy birthday.
Congratulations, happy anniversary, and much success in the next 5 years.
Thank you all so much for everything that you do, and I look forward to what the next 5 years will bring you.
Thank you, Diki. You're my hero.
We're helping change these people's lives, and not just their lives, probably the lives of their kids and their kids' kids, etc. So I think that's a very profound impact, and that's probably what makes me the proudest.
Oh, way to go, DET. Happy 5 years. I remember when you were this big. They grow up so fast. Anyway, we have two great talks coming up next. First, Dr. Burr Settles from Duolingo talks about how recent advances in artificial intelligence are helping Duolingo customize and improve their lessons. If you thought Duolingo was weird before, wait till you see what the computers came up with. Then, as a special treat, we have Chef Sola El-Waylly teaching us how to make cheesy bread inspired by South American recipes. This is going to be good.
Hello, my name is Burr Settles. I'm a research director here at Duolingo, and I'm very excited to talk to you today about some of the ways that we're using artificial intelligence to improve the ways that we teach through Duolingo. Now, to start things off, I want to talk a little bit about our mission, which is to develop the best education in the world and make it universally available. And we're not kidding when we say universally available. I've been with Duolingo for more than 8 years, and from day one, we were committed to building a free app that does not put educational content behind any kind of paywall. And that's also why we use technologies like the internet and mobile devices to deliver our lessons to as many people as possible. But we care equally about it being the best education. Now, to a lot of people, the best education comes from having a private one-on-one tutor or a really great teacher. And while that may be true in many cases, unfortunately, not everybody in the world has access to a one-on-one private tutor or a great teacher. So we believe that artificial intelligence is the best way to connect the dots and really achieve our mission. And to be clear, we're not interested in using AI to replace great teachers. On the contrary, through platforms like Duolingo for Schools, we want to use technology to enable teachers to do an even better job in the classroom. But until everybody in the world has access to a really great teacher, we think AI is the best way to scale that kind of experience to as many people as possible. Now, when you think about a really great teacher, I claim that they have 3 properties. One is that they know the material really well. Great teachers are domain experts in their chosen field. Number 2, they know how to make that material engaging, to make it exciting and interesting and motivate you to keep learning. And number 3, and perhaps most importantly, they're able to get inside your head. So great teachers, because of the one-on-one time that they spend with you, and because of the time that they spent with hundreds of other students in the past, they know how to understand the things that you know, the things that you don't know, the things that come easily and the things you struggle with, the things that you've probably forgotten by now and it's time to review. So what we've done at Duolingo is we've taken each of these 3 properties and turned them into research programs for our artificial intelligence efforts. So for example, when it comes to the material, we use machine learning and natural language processing to create tools that assist our world-class content developers in auditing and improving our courses. So this can be anything from analyzing the vocabulary and grammar content of our lessons to looking at scripts for Duolingo stories or Duolingo podcasts or audio lessons to make sure that we're hitting a target level of proficiency, be it beginner, intermediate, or advanced. When it comes to making the material engaging, we're using state-of-the-art speech technologies to create custom voices for our Duolingo world characters, which is super cool, and you're also going to be hearing more about that today. And believe it or not, whenever you get a push notification to remind you to do your daily Duolingo lesson, well, it turns out there's an AI algorithm that chose which out of hundreds of possible messages that we could send you at this precise moment to maximize the chances that you'll want to go and do a lesson on Duolingo. Now, those are just a few examples, but I'm going to spend most of our time today talking about how we use artificial intelligence to get inside your head and personalize your learning experience. And in particular, I'm going to focus on a new system we're really excited about that we affectionately call BirdBrain. Now, before I tell you what BirdBrain is, let me tell you a little bit about why we built it. In educational psychology, there's a concept known as the zone of proximal development, and it goes something like this. Whenever you're learning a new skill or ability, there's a sphere of things that you understand, that come easily, that you've already mastered, and you can do without receiving any kind of help. Now, just outside of that sphere is the zone of proximal development. Now, this is at the frontier of what you're able to do. You can still maybe do those tasks or learn those things, but you might need extra time or extra help. And beyond that, there are things that you're just not ready for. They're too hard at this moment. Now, there's lots of evidence to suggest that you're most challenged and motivated when you're learning at the edge of your abilities, or if you spend most of your time here in the zone of proximal development. Now, what that means for Duolingo is that whether you realize it or not, when you go and do a lesson, there are hundreds or thousands of possible exercises that we could try to cram into that 5-minute chunk of time. And so we want to maximize that time by filling it with lessons that are in your zone of proximal development for you personally, things that are not too easy or not too hard, but are just right to keep you challenged and motivated. So you might be wondering, how can AI help get you in the zone? Well, that's where BirdBrain comes in, and here's how it works. So for every learner and every exercise, BirdBrain can look at these two things and make a prediction that this learner has an 81% chance, for example, of getting this exercise correct. Now, some other exercise that might be more basic, it'll predict 98%. Like, this is super easy. But some other more challenging exercise, BirdBrain might make a prediction like 45%. This is probably something that it's too soon to try to put into your lessons. But that's all for the same learner. Some other learner who might be further along on their language learning journey might find this particular exercise a little bit easier, like 79%. And this might be in or closer to their personal zone of proximal development. So BirdBrain's able to do this because our algorithms learn to make accurate predictions from more than 5 billion exercises every single week. And this works because each of our individual learners have their own unique profile of the sorts of things that they tend to get right and tend to get wrong. So think about this. The next time you go and do a lesson on Duolingo, you're not only learning something new for yourself, but you're teaching BirdBrain a little bit about your personal abilities, as well as the difficulties of all of the exercises that we give you. And this, in turn, helps us to improve and personalize the learning experience for hundreds of millions of learners all around the world, which is very exciting for us. Now, you might be wondering, how do we know it's effective? One way we can do this is to look to see whether or not BirdBrain is making accurate predictions. Now, this chart shows the prediction quality of BirdBrain over the first 6 months or so after we built it at the beginning of last year. This particular chart is specifically for the course teaching English to Spanish speakers, but we got almost identical results for all of our courses. Now, it's important to note that not only is the prediction quality high, but it's increasing and improving over time as more learners use the platform. Another thing that we do, and we do this for almost all of our product changes, is A/B testing. Now, the way this works is we take all of our learners and split them up randomly into 2 different groups. Now, in the case of BirdBrain, 1/2 of those learners get lessons that are constructed using pre-existing heuristics that we've developed over the course of years. This is the control group. And for the other half of our learners, they get custom personalized lessons using BirdBrain. And this is the treatment group. And what we can do is compare learning outcomes between these 2 groups and see if BirdBrain is having a significant impact. So here are the results from one such A/B test where we used BirdBrain to personalize level 1 lessons. And here we saw a 3.5% increase in content length. So what this means is the sentences that you needed to translate or transcribe as part of the lessons were on average 3.5% longer. And this is one of the many different measures that we look at of how difficult the lessons are. Now, not only were they more challenging, but also more motivating because we saw a 6.3% increase in the time spent learning. So these learners were spending more time in the app. And we saw these same results again when we used BirdBrain to try and improve skill practice. We saw an almost 9% increase in content length and a 3% increase in time spent learning. And this is a pattern that we saw over and over again. In this chart, each dot represents a different A/B test that we ran, trying to use BirdBrain to improve the learning experience in some way. And as you can see, in most cases, we were able to increase both content length and time spent learning. And in fact, there's a positive, statistically significant relationship between these two, meaning that if BirdBrain succeeds in making the lessons more challenging, it's also likely to succeed in making it more motivating by a proportional amount. Now, this may seem obvious or even easy, but it turns out it's really not. So let's compare these green dots to these blue dots that represent A/B tests that were run using more conventional product development and software engineering techniques. So for these other non-BirdBrain A/B tests, there's almost no relationship between content length and time spent learning, and a lot fewer of those experiments succeeded in improving both. But BirdBrain, because it takes into account both the difficulty of the exercises and where you're at on your own personal learning journey and puts the two together, it's able to strike a good balance and balance the tensions between these two extremes and improve the language learning experience. Now, today, BirdBrain is used in some way for almost all session types that are in the app. And it's used in particular to choose the really difficult exercises that go into hard mode practice for extra XP or for the legendary skills that you'll also be hearing about today. And of course, we're working to make BirdBrain even better. We have ongoing research to make it more accurate, more linguistically detailed, so not only is there a 90% chance that you'll get this right, but if you get it wrong, it's probably because of this tricky noun, adjective, gender agreement, for example. And all of this makes BirdBrain more useful. So, if you're excited or interested to learn more about the ways that we're using artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing, and so forth here at Duolingo, I encourage you to check out duolingo.ai. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of DuoCon.
Hello, I'm Sola El-Whaley. I'm a recipe developer, video host, and I used to be a chef. You may know me from my work with Food 52, the New York Times, or the History Channel, but today I'm here to talk to you about my love of cheese. Well, and language, but mostly cheese. Let's say 90% cheese and cheese-related things and 10% language. Okay, so I'm always looking for more ways to incorporate cheese into my diet. So when my husband Ham, who is half Bolivian, made this cheesy bread from Bolivia for me, I kind of lost my mind. It's called cuña pez, but after a little bit of research, we found that this cheesy bread is really important throughout different countries in South America, where they have variations on this bread with different names and slight regional differences. In Brazil, it's called pão de queijo, where they make it with an aged cheese from the region of Minas Gerais. And then in Colombia, it's called pan de bono, where sometimes they add masa repa to it, and it's found like a little flattened disc rather than balls. And then in northern Argentina and Paraguay, it's called chipa. So what's up with all these names? We're gonna talk about it. We're gonna talk about the different types of bread, and I'm gonna make for you my US version using ingredients that are indigenous to me. So I'm gonna use Bob's Red Mill flour, sharp New York State cheddar, and we're gonna call it cheesy bread. So let's get cooking. So the key to this bread is tapioca starch, which is refined from a tuberous root that you can find in South America, the Caribbean, and Asia. Depending on where it's grown, the tapioca starch that you make from it can be a little bit different. So depending on what kind of starch you use, the bread's gonna be a little bit different. Okay, so now we know where this tapioca starch comes from. In the bowl it goes. Oops. And to this I'm gonna add some baking powder. Baking powder is more of a modern addition. So the traditional bread of the indigenous people, it was just the tapioca starch. It was really dense, I'm sure. Here we go with the salt. And I'm gonna, oh, it's a little humid. Let's get the salt in there. And I'm going to scald my milk and butter. So dairy didn't come to South America until the colonists came, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Italians. The land there was really favorable for growing grass and having dairy cows. So dairy became really popular, and it only got added to this bread very recently, like in the early 20th century, dairy began becoming a part of this bread. That's when this bread really became what we know it as today. So I'm gonna whisk up my tapioca starch, my baking powder, and my salt while I wait for my milk to scald. You can make this bread without scalding the milk. I just find that the dough comes together a little bit better if you take the time to heat up the milk. Okay, so I'm scalding my milk, my butter, and then we're gonna add it to our starch. Okay, my milk is hot. I'm gonna add it to the tapioca starch, and we're gonna stir it up. We want to kind of distribute this heat before we add the eggs so they don't curdle with this hot liquid. But once we get it mixed throughout the starch, it's gonna be safe to add. Mostly mixed, you know? Tapioca starch is a really interesting texture. It gets really chewy. If you've ever had mochi, which is made from sweet rice flour, it's got a similar texture, but it's What's unique about it is that it also traps air, so you end up with a really nice and fluffy bread, even without the baking powder. Okay, now I'm gonna add my eggs. Okay, so I'm mixing this all up. Now tapioca, unlike wheat flour, doesn't have any gluten, so you don't have to worry about over mixing it. Just make sure you take your time and do not undermix. You wanna make sure everything gets hydrated, or you can get like this weird squeaky texture if you bite into like a ball of starch. Gross, you don't want that. Okay, so now that I got everything mixed up, I'm gonna add my cheese. So I'm sticking with cheese that I can easily find. We've got some sharp cheddar, and I'm gonna use a little bit of grated pecorino. This is definitely not the cheese that they use in South America. Each of the cheesy breads I mentioned earlier are all made with local cheeses, which really adds to the flavor and characteristics of the bread. The cheese doesn't just give it flavor, but it's gonna affect the texture. So a drier cheese, like the one they use in Bolivia, is gonna make a little bit of a drier bread that holds its shape a little bit better than like the meltier cheese that you might find in other regions. So try this with different cheeses and you'll invent your own local cheesy bread, you know what I mean? Okay, now, what I found really interesting is when I've made this with this Bob's Red Mill tapioca flour, you get more of like a batter. It's almost like a pancake batter. But when you use that Brazilian starch, it's like a dough, even with the exact same weights, because it's ground differently, the texture's different, it hydrates liquid differently, so it's gonna be a little bit different, but it's still gonna be cheesy. Because this batter is so much looser than the one that you make with the traditional starch, I'm actually gonna bake it in a muffin tin. So normally you'd form these into balls, just like a dinner roll. When you make it with the South American starch, you form these into balls, and then you bake it and you get these nice little round, beautiful cheesy bread. But I'm gonna do this in a muffin tin. I'm gonna do a little spritzy spritz. You know, if you wanted to really go for it, brush it in butter. Let's scoop. You can also just use a ladle or a couple of spoons, but I really like using these scoops for portioning anything really. Like cookies, of course, with different doughs and batters. It's gonna make sure that each one is about the same height. Now these are gonna bake at 400 degrees and it's gonna poof, just like pâte à choux. That's what's incredible about tapioca starch. It can really hold on to air in a way that a lot of other starches can't. It's gonna get really poofy, golden brown. The outside has a nice crunchy, cheesy texture. The inside's gonna be fluffy and also chewy at the same time. I've got my cheesy bread batter in my muffin tins. It's gonna bake at 400 degrees until it's nice, poofy, golden brown, and squishy on the inside. Okay, my bread is brown, it's poofed, let's get it. Oh, it smells very cheesy in here. And look at that. Whoa. Nice and golden brown. You can see the little flecks of cheese. They got like extra brown. You know when you make a grilled cheese and some of the cheese comes out the side and it gets extra crispy? Watch how easily it pops right out. Should we do it? Are you ready for a dump? Wow. Beautiful, right? Because we did it in a muffin tin, we got extra crust. Woo! All around. Woo! So hot. Okay, let's break into one of these guys. Oh, so crusty on the outside. You can hear that crusty. Now the inside, see how the inside, it's like stretchy, but fluffy. You can see these big bubbles. Ooh, and I love how you get this really great contrast because there's crunchy on the outside, just like a Cheez-It, chewy on the inside. Mmm. Mmm. What's incredible about this texture is the tapioca starch gives you this like chewy, stretchy texture that's a lot like cheese. So it's like these two things that have similar textures. When they come together, they just like magnify each other's chewy, stretchy cheesiness. It's so good. So we got these nice, beautiful bubbles on the inside. You know what this needs? Maybe like more cheese. Make a cheese sandwich out of this cheesy bread. Well, I mean, whether you make this with the South American starch and South American ingredients, or you make it with ingredients you have around, it's gonna be delicious. I hope you try it. Make your own cheesy bread, and like, think about how amazing it is that different languages, cultures, and cuisines came together to bring us this amazing cheesy glory. Thanks a lot for hanging out with me, and enjoy the rest of DuoCon, hopefully with cheesy bread.
My name is Pilar Garcia and I live in Bogota, Colombia. My first language is Spanish, and thanks to Duolingo, I speak English, German, Portuguese, and I'm learning Korean and Russian. I started first with English. I remember as a kid having a channel that only broadcasted music in English, and I really wanted to understand what they were saying. I discovered Duolingo in 2013 because I was applying for a job at a contact center where the requirement was to speak English. I've had a lot of positions where English is crucial to have, so it certainly has served me well. I am very thankful to the language. From there, it has been a crazy journey. I started out as an agent, and then I quickly made my way to a coach, and then I moved towards a manager position. Faz muito tempo. Fala como você está. I feel fulfilled, and that just triggered me to learn even more. I've gotten better positions every time I apply to a different company. And it's just so nice to be able to speak with pretty much the whole world. My dream is to have like 7 languages, like master 7 languages. And I go through the mistakes that I've done previously because the app has like a tab of everything you've gotten wrong. I have each notebook for each language, for Korean, for German, for Russian, for Portuguese. They're like my kids. I remember when I was a little kid, my mom would tell me, if you speak English, like all doors will be open. Now I see it, but not only with English. If it wasn't because I didn't speak German and Portuguese, probably I wouldn't have landed that job. My mom was encouraged by the fact that I'm all the time with the application, and there was a time where, hey, try Duolingo, try this, it's so funny. Every night she's like, I can go to sleep without, doing my lesson.
Oh, I had too much cheesy bread. Not just now, throughout the course of my life. Well, we have 2 great talks coming up next. First, Emily and Kevin from Duolingo are going to share how Duolingo is using voice capture technology to create unique voices for each of the Duolingo characters. And then, co-founder and CEO Luis von Ahn is going to give his State of Duolingo talk. By the way, did you know Luis is secretly obsessed with the hit teen drama series Gossip Girl? So stay tuned. He's going to do a full 20-minute presentation on his thoughts on the reboot. It's going to be rough.
Hi, I'm Emily Chu. I'm a creative producer at Duolingo, and later I will be joined by Kevin Lenzo, research scientist on the Speech Lab. Last year at DuoCon, we introduced you to our characters and their names, and this year Kevin and I would like to introduce you to their voices. So you're probably familiar with Siri or Alexa's voices, these super iconic, recognizable, computer-generated voices that you pretty much hear everywhere now. These are produced by having a real person, usually an actor, read thousands and thousands of lines, and the result is a computer-generated voice that can take any text you give it and read it in that person's voice. So in a nutshell, this is what text-to-speech, or TTS, is. Duolingo also uses TTS. We don't record every single line that we have in the app. For a long time in our app, we use generic or stock TTS voices that you could purchase just like stock photography, for example. So here's an example of how our character Junior, who's an 8-year-old boy, sounded like in the Spanish to English course.
Drugstores sell both shampoo and conditioner.
So as you can tell, that doesn't really sound like an 8-year-old boy. So what we're working on now is giving our characters their own distinct voices that reflect their individual personalities. So I'll give you an example of what Junior sounds like now.
Drugstores sell both shampoo and conditioner.
So Junior is just one of our 10 Duolingo characters. We've been developing these characters for 1.5 years, and we've always had Duo, but now we have these 9 other human characters that accompany you in the app, from stories to lessons. 2 of my favorite characters are Lily, the thoroughly unimpressed, surly-looking teenage girl in the center with the purple hair, and also Oscar, who is the mustachioed fancy pants art teacher in the pink shirt. I won't go through all the characters now, but they all have their own distinct personalities and backstories that we've been developing. One thing we considered a lot when we were developing these characters is how to make them really, really iconic. So just super memorable, distinctive, with really strong brand recognition, but also really relatable and engaging and just fun. So to this aim, we consulted some experts who have created some really iconic characters. So we talked to the studios behind Sesame Street and Adventure Time. One of the things we learned is that characters are really iconic because of how they look, how they move, and how they sound. So our team had already done an incredible job with look and move portions of it. You know, the characters were already in the app, they were cheering you on, celebrating your wins. So the last piece of the puzzle was really just how they sound. And the first step to figuring that out was casting. So we decided to borrow some best practices from animation in Hollywood. We hired a casting director. She worked on Robot Chicken and Call of Duty, and we started reviewing auditions from established voiceover actors. So what were we looking for in these auditions? The first thing was personality. We really wanted lots and lots of personality. Because in our app, most of the content is just single sentences in the lessons, we really needed these actors to convey these characters' personalities really clearly in just a single sentence. The second thing we looked for was humor and entertainment. So we really just wanted funny, engaging voices that could really make our users laugh and smile. So the last thing we were looking for is distinctiveness. So clearly we want to be able to distinguish the characters from one another, but also one thing that's really important when you're learning a new language is to hear all different kinds of voices. So adults of different ages and genders, as well as children who are often really the hardest to understand, especially in a language that's not your native tongue. So to do this, we spent many, many months reviewing hundreds and hundreds of auditions, really debating the merits of each. Sometimes it even got a little bit contentious because we were each fighting for like the version of Oscar that we really wanted. But after about a year, we had cast 9 characters in English. We had even finished recording all of the necessary lines to record the TTS. So this was a huge milestone for us. But what about the other 39 languages that we teach? So we decided to move forward in 4 of our most popular languages, Spanish, French, German, and Japanese. But very quickly, we ran into this huge logistical problem, which is how do you cast in a language that's not your native tongue? So most of our team is native English speakers. We're learners of these languages, but we're not proficient necessarily. We're not advanced, we're not fluent, we're not native, definitely. So we're missing some nuance of the performances. So we wondered, how do you capture the nuance of Little Boy Jr. on the left, his precociousness in German, or Emo Teen Lily in the center, her sarcasm in Japanese? We decided to take a really analytical approach to this issue. So we assembled a team of native speakers, some creatives and some language experts, and we had them evaluate specific qualities in the auditions. So for a Lily audition, for example, we would ask them, on a scale of 1 to 5, how disdainful does this actor sound? Or for Oscar, the fancy pants art teacher, right, we would ask them, how pretentious does this character sound on a scale of 1 to 5? And we ended up with actors in all the other languages that sounded pretty similar in some cases to the English actor. And in some cases, they were kind of like the French version of that character. So right now, I'm going to play for you the English version of Oscar.
My father and my mother like my jacket.
And also the French version of Oscar.
Mon père et ma mère aiment mon blouson.
So we are almost finished recording these, and we're actually building the voices now. So I'm going to pass this off to Kevin to talk about building voices.
Thanks, Emily. All right, let's talk about building synthetic voices. We use machine learning to make these voices talk. And that means that we're analyzing everything that goes into it, all of the text, and we're predicting how a voice should say everything, the phrasing, the timing, the intonation, everything. Once we do build it out of these amazing materials that Emily just talked about, with characters that bring everything to life, then we make sure it's up to our quality standards. We thoroughly evaluate everything. If there's something that doesn't work just right, we try to improve the algorithms or correct, remove, and edit the data that goes into it to make it just right. One example might be if a question doesn't rise the way it should at the end of a sentence. The building blocks that go into this are those 6,000 aforementioned sentences. These are carefully designed and completely balanced for combinations of speech sounds in different contexts with phrasings and different sentence types. For instance, the sounds in speech sound different in different contexts, like the initial L in the word lateral sounds different from the final L. And the same is true for the initial and final R in the word reader. The P in the word peak is pronounced differently from the P in speak. And we want to get all of these things correct because we want to teach people as if they're learning from a native speaker. To get all the context that we'd need about 100 times the amount of data that we collect for this 6,000 sentences. And from these 6,000 sentences, we're going to make a lot of content in all of these voices. Once we build the voices, we still have to say everything correctly. And language can be ambiguous. For instance, the English word R-E-A-D could be pronounced read or read, depending on whether it's the present or the past tense. Or the phrasing may be wrong. For instance, we might hear, she never saw a dog and didn't smile, which means something very different from, she never saw a dog and didn't smile. And another simple example would be if I were to say your name, hello, Kevin, as opposed to, hello, Kevin. Every one of these examples is corrected by a linguist. So when we see something or hear something that's wrong in the course content, we can fix it. Now, why would we build these voices? The key is really flexible content. We can bring new content to life, we can fix things, we can add new content, and we can respond to what a learner is going through. We can make new lessons depending on what they're doing at the time. And it adds depth and brings that content to life, as we've seen before. In short, they sound great, they help us be nimble, and they open up new learning experiences. Well, that's enough of us talking. Now let's hear from our characters, who can speak for themselves.
We each have our own personalities,
and we have backstories and relationships,
which help to add depth to our characters.
It makes language learning more fun.
And provides lots of variety for learners to hear.
Not just one or two, but many different people's voices.
Putting everyone together brings language learning alive.
Get to know our stories.
As you learn to read, write, listen, and speak with Duolingo.
Gracias.
Merci.
Hasta la vista.
Now that our characters have said thank you for themselves, we would also like to thank you and everyone who helps bring these characters to life.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Luis Fonan, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Duolingo. And today I'm going to tell you about the state of our company. But before doing that, I want to thank you all for spending time with us. Everything we do it for you. So we're very happy and honored that you've been here with us. Now, Duocon has become a really huge thing. Last year was the first time we did it entirely online. We had a lot of people with us. We had 118,000 live attendees from more than 152 countries. And so it was a huge event. We're hoping that this year is going to be even bigger than last year. And we're also super happy that we're going to have Duocon again next year. It's Duocon 2022. We're hopefully going to be able to have it in person in New York City. But of course, for those of you who cannot make it, it's going to be entirely streamed live so that you can be with us throughout the day. So next year, Duocon 2022, very happy about it. Now, when I talk about Duolingo, the most important thing to know about Duolingo is our mission. Every time I talk about Duolingo, I like to bring up our mission. Our mission is to develop the best education in the world and to make it universally available. There's a couple of things to say about this. First is, notice that our mission is not about language learning. Even though everybody knows us for a language learning product, our mission is more general. It's about all of education. The way I see it, the two biggest problems that humanity has are global warming and economic inequality. We are working on reducing economic inequality, and we believe that the best way to reduce economic inequality is through education. Our mission is not just about language learning, it's more general, and you'll see, as I'm going to talk about at the end of this talk, we are expanding to teaching other subjects and not just languages. But for the last 10 years, the main thing we've been doing is teaching languages, and I'm going to talk mostly about languages, of course. Now, as a company, our strategy, we're working on 5 things. These are the main 5 things we work on as a company, and they are these. The first one is we are working on growing our number of learners. By now, we have about 40 million monthly active learners. We are by far the largest language learning platform in the world. We're the most popular way to learn languages in the world. But of course, we're not done. There's many more people in the world, and so we are continuing to reach more and more people. So we're growing our number of learners. What we do to grow our number of learners is, of course, making Duolingo more and more enjoyable so that people use it a lot, so that people don't stop using it, and so that people tell their friends. So we work a lot on that. Another big area that we work on is in teaching better. Of course, the ultimate goal of Duolingo is to teach you languages, and so we work a lot on teaching better. The largest team at Duolingo is the team that is dedicated to teaching better. I'm going to talk a lot about some of the initiatives that we have, and you've heard a lot during Duocon, but really, the main thing, the biggest thing we work on is teaching people better. The third kind of big initiative that we work on is growing our number of paid subscribers. These are the people that subscribe to Duolingo Plus. Most of our users use Duolingo entirely for free. In fact, only 5% of our users pay to subscribe. However, those people that pay to subscribe really help because they support the rest of the users, and they really are the ones who support this entire operation. So we're very thankful for the people who subscribe, but we are working a lot on basically adding features and making the subscription more and more enticing so that we can fund the rest of the initiatives. So we're working a lot on growing our subscribers. The fourth big thing that we're working on is trying to become the proficiency standard for how much people know a language. So today, if somebody asks you how much French do you know, for example, the common answers that people give are, I'm intermediate in French. That's just not a very good answer because, well, it doesn't mean much. Another common answer is, I took 4 years of French in high school, also doesn't mean much. What we would like to do, we would like it to be the case that in a few years, when somebody asks you how much French do you know, you say, I'm a Duolingo 65 or I'm a Duolingo 85 or something. So we're working on adding a proficiency score to the app so that anybody can talk about their proficiency in the language. And one of the big efforts that we have on this is also the Duolingo English test. We have a standardized English proficiency test that you have heard about. We're using that score, and we're going to try to translate that score to many other languages. And the hope is that we can become the proficiency standard in a few years. And we're working a lot on that. And then the last big initiative that we're working on is expanding beyond language learning. We already launched Duolingo ABC, which is an app to teach early literacy, but we're going to be working on other subjects that I'm going to talk about. We're teaching other subjects, and I'm going to talk about that. Now, let me tell you a little bit about some changes to the product that we've been, features that we've been adding and work that we've been doing on the product, because these are just some very exciting initiatives. The first thing that I'm going to talk about are efficacy and just how well we teach, and also why efficacy is important. Well, in particular, efficacy is very important because it's ultimately what we're trying to do. Our mission is to develop the best education in the world and make it universally available. So, we're really just trying to teach better. We're very happy with our efficacy. I'm going to talk a little bit about these results. But the most important thing to understand, or the first thing to understand, is that our courses are aligned to the Common European Framework of Reference. Some people call it CEFR or CEFR. And what the Common European Framework of Reference does is it gives you kind of 6 buckets of how well you know a language. There's really a 7th bucket, which is you don't know the language. So it's you don't know the language, then there's A1, A2, then there's B1, B2, C1, C2. So the A levels are the beginner levels, the B levels are the intermediate levels, and the C levels are the advanced ones. So C2, for example, is somebody that is just very, very highly proficient in a language. That's not even enough to just be a native speaker. Many native speakers of a language are actually level C1 and not C2. C2 is native speaker, and also you have a really good command of the language. The way I think about it is kind of Obama level speaking. It's just somebody that just speaks really, really well. The A levels, of course, are just beginners, but already if you speak a language to level A2, you can do a lot of things. So for example, you can ask for directions, you can have simple conversations, you can probably buy things, etc. At Duolingo, we try really hard to teach people to level B2. B2 is a level that is enough for people to get a knowledge job in that language. So for example, if you wanted to get a job at Duolingo, we speak English here inside the company, and your English level was B2, that would be perfectly fine. And that's true of most companies. Knowledge jobs, B2 is enough for knowledge jobs. And what we're trying to do with Duolingo is teach in all our languages to teach to level B2. We're not there yet for all our languages, but that is, the thing that we're working on really hard. Last year at DuoCon, we actually had a whole presentation about our effectiveness. And this is a study that we're very proud of. Here's what we did, just for those of you who didn't see it last year. The study that we ran was as follows. We got people who started learning on Duolingo who specifically said they had either no prior proficiency or very low prior proficiency in either French or Spanish. So these were people that basically didn't know either French or Spanish. And then we had them learn on Duolingo. And then whenever they reached Unit 5, when they completed Unit 5 on Duolingo, which is about halfway down the Spanish or French course, we asked them, did you use anything other than Duolingo to learn? And of those who only used Duolingo, we said, okay, so these are people who were learning Spanish on Duolingo, came to Duolingo without knowing any Spanish or French. They learned and they didn't use anything other than Duolingo. To those people, we gave them a standardized test to figure out how much of the language they knew. And then we compared their scores with scores of people who, rather than learning on Duolingo, were learning by taking university classes. And what we found is that people who study on Duolingo learn the equivalent of people who had taken 4 university semesters of either French or Spanish. But what's most amazing is that it took about half the time for people to learn that on Duolingo. So that's something that we're very proud of. Now, this study that we presented last year measured two things. It measured listening proficiency and reading proficiency. The reason we measure those two first is because those are the easiest to measure, and it's kind of what everybody compares language knowledge with. But of course, we want to measure other types of proficiency. For example, speaking proficiency. Now, this year, I'm very happy to announce the results of a study that we just ran. You can find it, of course, on duolingo.com/efficacy. And a study that we just ran to measure speaking skills. And so what we did here is pretty similar to what we did for listening and reading skills, in that we took people who had no prior proficiency in either Spanish or French, used Duolingo and finished Unit 5. So this is kind of the first part of the course, the beginner part of the course. Now, internally, Unit 5 for us, if you finish Unit 5, what we expect for you to be able to know is A2 of a language. That's the internal kind of what we try to achieve. And so what we did here is we took these people who finished Unit 5 and then we measured how good their speaking skills were. And what we found is that over 50% of the people who finished Unit 5 had speaking skills of at least A2. So you can see here, in both Spanish or French, about 40% of the people had speaking skills of A2, and then a few more. So in Spanish was another maybe 20-some% had speaking skills of B2 or better, and then in French, it's another about 10% had speaking skills of either B1 or better. In total, for both languages, more than 50% of the people had the speaking skills that we expected. So that's something that we're very proud of. So that basically means that Duolingo is very good at teaching you speaking. Now, in addition to that, we're in fact improving how well we teach speaking. And let me tell you about a few things that we're working on that we're adding to the app, not just with speaking, but with other things. The first one, of course, is with speaking. We have started adding conversation lessons. You can see them on iOS so far. We're going to be adding them soon to Android. And these are in certain languages, in French and in Spanish. We have these conversational lessons where the idea is that we take everything you've learned on Duolingo, and then here we get you to practice it with something that feels like a very real conversation, where you may be either asking for directions or buying something or eating at a restaurant. And so these are these very real scenarios, and you get to have an entire conversation where you speak one part of it. And whenever you don't pronounce something well, we try to really drill down the pronunciation, etc. And the idea is for you to really practice real-world conversations with this. The hope is that with this, you're even going to be able to improve your speaking even more than what we had with before. So that's something that we're very proud of. Another big product that we're very proud of is a feature we call Hoots. You can see it on the web right now. It's available for French. Pretty soon it's going to be on iPhones, and we're going to be rolling it out to all the different languages. And this is a feature that tries to improve how well you write. So the idea is to practice your writing. What it is a daily writing prompt that we automatically grade, and we tell you whether you said something right or wrong, and whether you made any mistakes in your writing. So you can imagine that every day we may ask you things like, what did you have for breakfast today? Or please describe your hometown, or what's your ideal vacation? And the idea is that you have to write a short paragraph in the language that you're learning, and automatically, through artificial intelligence, we tell you whether you wrote it well, and if you didn't write it well, we try to give you corrections for how to really write it. Now, one of the reasons why it's taken us so long to get here is because developing the artificial intelligence to be able to grade free written text has been pretty difficult, but we're very proud of what we have so far. And here you can see more screenshots. The idea is that you're writing, and also we give you recommendations about how to write certain things. There's a lot of help that we give you if you don't know how to write a given word. You can just look it up right there, and then it'll tell you how to write it. And the idea is that you can write really these relatively long paragraphs, especially for beginners, and then we can grade the whole thing without ever using a human. So this is something we're very proud of, and will really help you practice your writing. Another thing that I'm very happy to announce is that we're going to be adding 5 new languages pretty soon. These are very highly requested languages. They're for English speakers, so people who already speak English are going to be able to learn 5 more languages. The first one is Tagalog. We're also going to be adding 2 South African languages, Zulu and Xhosa. We're going to be adding Maori, and we're also going to be adding Haitian Creole. You're going to see us be adding languages every single year. The 5 that we decided to add are these, and we're very excited by it.
Another big initiative that we have for this year that we're very proud of is a full revamp of Duolingo for schools. So, Duolingo is used in a lot of schools. According to our best estimates, approximately 40% of language classrooms in the United States use Duolingo. We have a tool called Duolingo for Schools, which is for teachers. The idea is that students all use Duolingo normally as they would, but Duolingo for Schools allows teachers to track what their students are learning. You can find Duolingo for Schools at schools.duolingo.com. That tool has been there, but this year we are doing a complete overhaul of this tool. It will look a lot better. We have a massively simplified onboarding flow and also massively simplified student account creation and a lot more new features. So the hope is that teachers are just going to have a much better time using Duolingo in schools than they did before. And that's something that we're very excited about because we know how much Duolingo can help in schools, especially when schools are not fully in person. So very happy with this. Another big thing, of course, I already referenced this, is Duolingo ABC. Last year, we launched an app. We talked about it called Duolingo ABC, which is a literacy app, early literacy app. This is for kids ages roughly 3 to 6 to learn how to read. Right now, it only exists in English. So these are kids who already know English. We're not trying to teach them English. They already know English, but we're trying to teach them how to read in English. The app has been growing very nicely, and since we launched it last year, it has received a number of major awards. For example, it was chosen as one of Time Magazine's best inventions of 2020. It won the Kidscreen Best Learning App. It won the Webby Award. So it's won a lot of awards, and it's because it's a free way to teach how to read. And our goal with this app is really to reduce worldwide illiteracy. It's crazy that today many children around the world don't learn how to read or don't learn how to read very well. For example, there's 1 billion adults in the world that are illiterate. We're hoping to combat that with an app that is free, that can be used throughout the world to teach kids how to read. And so that's something that we're very excited about. You're going to see us put a lot more effort on this, and the app is going to continue getting better. And actually, this brings us to one of the things that I talked about that we're working on as a company, which is expanding beyond just teaching foreign languages. A big thing that we're doing is teaching literacy. We're also going to be teaching math. And the idea is that we're trying to find subjects that improve people's opportunities in life. So obviously teaching somebody how to read is can massively improve somebody's life. We're also working on a math app to teach elementary school math. This is kind of how it's going to look like. The basic idea is it's going to be pretty similar to Duolingo in that it's going to be a gamified, fun way to learn math. In fact, we're going to be using a lot of the same technology that we're using with Duolingo to teach languages. We're going to be using it to teach elementary school math. And so we're very proud of this. This app hopefully will come out to the public next year. And again, it's something that we're extremely proud of. So what's next? We're going to continue, of course, expanding to teaching other subjects. I talked about literacy, I talked about math. Our mission is to develop the best education in the world and make it universally available. And as long as there are people in the world who can't read, or there are people in the world who don't know basic math, or there are people in the world who want to continue learning things, we still have a lot of work to do. One of our operating principles inside the company at Duolingo is we haven't won yet. And I really believe we haven't won yet until we have taught everything that there is to teach. So we're going to be continuing to expand the subjects that we teach. We're going to continue working really hard on this. I hope to see you in person next year in New York City, or if not in person, online next year. And thank you all for watching.
And now the moment everyone has been waiting for, a conversation between the very handsome, talented, and funny Duolingo CEO Luis von Ahn and Trevor Noah. One of these people is paying me to be here.
Trevor, Noah, thank you so much for coming in and being here with us. I don't know if you've been told about this, but a couple of years ago we had a huge offsite with our entire marketing team, and we were trying to figure out what our brand is really like. And one of the questions that was asked, to the whole group was if Duolingo was a celebrity, was a person that is a celebrity, who would it be? And we really all agreed it would be you.
Oh wow!
So I don't know if this is a compliment. I don't know. But this is what we thought, and there's a number of reasons. I mean, you're multicultural, you're worldly. You make things fun. That's how we think about Duolingo. We try to make things fun. So thank you so much for sitting down with us today for DuoCon.
Well, thank you very much for having me. As the person who uses Duolingo, I think I take that as a compliment. I mean, I hope that means I'll get a little bonus on all my scores when I'm going through my lessons. But I mean, yeah, I'm not trying to get anything in exchange. I'm just saying it would be nice if I got a little, maybe one extra life is all I'm asking for. And yeah, but thank you for that.
Yeah, we'll protect your streak if you miss a day. We'll protect your streak just for you. So this is a question answer session where we have I have a number of questions and they're mainly about you. We want to find out things about you. I'll start with one about languages, which it's impressive. I didn't actually know about this. It seems that you speak 8 languages, which is quite a large number. Can you walk me through which languages you learned first and which ones you're most proficient in?
So this is a misconception, and I feel like somebody's trolling me on the internet. Every time I go do an interview, the languages increase. I do not speak 8 languages. I speak 5 languages, all right? The additional 3, I don't know where they come from, who's been spreading these lies. So I speak 5 languages. I speak English, obviously. I speak Afrikaans, which is an offshoot of Dutch. I speak Zulu. I speak Tswana. I speak Tsonga. And then I can dabble in German. My German's gotten really bad now because I haven't been practicing. I haven't been able to go to Germany. And I think immersion is one of the big things that helps you stick with the language. So those are like, I'd say 5.5-ish languages is what I can speak. And then I'm trying to learn Spanish now. And then the next one will be French. So I'm trying to get to 8. I do not speak 8 currently, 5.
Well, that's still really impressive. I have a question actually about Afrikaans, which this is just a question. Can you understand Dutch?
So I can understand Dutch. Afrikaans is a really interesting language because I think it's one of the youngest languages on the planet, actually. And I remember when I went to the Netherlands for the first time, the best description of Afrikaans for me from a Dutch person was, it sounds like a drunk child is trying to speak Dutch, is basically what Afrikaans sounds like to a Dutch person. So when Dutch people speak to me really slowly, as if I'm very drunk, then I understand everything they're saying. And then when I speak Afrikaans, they completely understand and they just think that I'm completely inebriated. But yeah, it's actually fascinating. And what's nice is because Dutch is part of the Germanic languages, I have an ear for others. So sometimes if I'm in Sweden, I can understand a few of the things people are saying. Yeah, even though I've never learned Swedish, I don't understand anything that's going on, but there are a few sentences and words here and there that I actually pick up on. So I guess Afrikaans has helped me in that regard. So I can understand a bit of Dutch. My German picks up quickly. And then if I'm in Scandinavia, there are things I can hear in and out of conversation.
Your comment about drunken speaking is exactly how I think. I'm a native Spanish speaker, and I think Portuguese sounds like drunken Spanish. No offense to Portuguese speakers.
Oh, how can you say that, Luis? No meu país falamos português. How can you say that, Luis?
You even know some Portuguese. Oh wow, okay. By the way, there's this weird thing between Portuguese and Spanish where everybody who speaks Portuguese somehow speaks Spanish really well. But the other way around is just not true. And I don't know why that is, but it's always amazed me.
Well, here's what I found. The thing is, the originators of the languages are generally more snobbish, and so they don't learn like the street version of what their language creates. And so the people can go the other way around. But I've learned like Spanish speakers, they just refuse all of the shishes that come with Portuguese.
Yeah.
They just refuse all of it. And then Portuguese speakers are like, look, man, we're going to learn Spanish and we're going to learn Portuguese. And I think that's probably why it's easier for them.
Yeah, I mean, I feel really dumb every time I'm in Brazil that all of them speak my language and I don't speak theirs. But I have a, there's in your book you shared a story about nearly being mugged by men who spoke Xhosa. Can you share more about that incident and how the language helped you out that day?
Yeah, well, I was, in South Africa, just like in many countries around the world, if you're going around to certain parts of town, you've got to be alert. You've got to be aware, because you could get mugged, you could get robbed, anything could go wrong. And so I grew up in a world where I always had to be hyper aware, even as a little kid. And so I don't remember how old I was when this happened. I know I was a teenager, but I was walking through the streets and I was in a suburb. And there was a group of guys who were walking behind me. And, they were gaining pace slowly. And at some point, they were within earshot. And they were speaking to each other. And the guys were saying to each other, in Zulu, I think it wasn't actually in Xhosa. In Zulu, they were saying, okay, guys, we're going to rob this kid and his friends. And my friends couldn't understand what they were saying. And I could. And I heard this guy and I was like, man, these guys they're going to rob us. And I could hear the one saying to the other one, cross the street and you're going to cut them off on this side. And, we'll get them at the next block and let's get ready and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And I could hear them planning who do they think has what and who. And at some point, I turned to the guys and I forget exactly what I said, but I just turned to the guys and I basically just spoke to them. I was like, show my fit. My chance. And they were like, what's going on here? And then I said to them, I was like, hey, who are we going to rob? What's the plan? And these guys just looked at me and they were shocked. And then the guy said, he apologized. He was like, hey, he's like, and he's like, I thought you were like a white man. I thought you couldn't understand the language. Then I was like, no, I can understand everything here. And his face changed and his world changed. And you could see it was a small moment where he didn't see the other in the thing, and although obviously he was planning to like rob me, it was a weird humanizing moment where he saw me as someone as opposed to something, and his face changed, his demeanor changed, and him and his friends spoke and they spoke to me, and then they left us alone and they walked away. And I think that was one of the few instances in my life where I learned like in a very real way how powerful language is, because it connects you to people in a way that very few other things can. It separates you, it takes away the class dimensions, it takes away racial dimensions, it takes away so many things. Because if you can speak to somebody in their language, and I mean, even in like the cadence, the street language, whatever it is that they use, if you can really speak to them in their language, they stop seeing you as the other. And that's what I've always loved about language and why I always try and learn it.
That's a beautiful story. You know what's insane about it? I have a very similar story, but here in the US, I'm from Guatemala, almost being mugged by two Guatemalans in the BART in San Francisco.
Wow.
And I heard them plotting, and I turned around and I asked them if they were from Guatemala, and they said yes. And then they were like, oh, you're from Guatemala too. And we bonded on that. Now, my answer was not as good as yours. I didn't say who are we going to rob. I was legitimately frightened. I thought they were going to actually rob me.
And then you spoke to them, and then all of a sudden it changed, right?
No, completely. And the fact that we're from the same country, they're like, oh my God. And, afterwards, they were kind of asking me for recommendations for things.
They were asking you for recommendations on who to rob. Who do you think we should rob now, Luis?
I don't actually want to be friends with criminals, but hey. Cool. Well, let's see. Next question I have here is this. You're very funny in English. I mean, I personally find you very funny in English. Do you think you're as funny in other languages? Do you think there's a difference in how funny you can be in other languages?
Oh, definitely. I would argue that maybe I am the least funny in English. I feel like English is like a really stiff language. It doesn't allow itself much in the way of onomatopoeia, and it doesn't play. I don't know how to explain it, but like I find English is a very sterilized language in the way you say things and how they come out of your mouth. I'm sure you know this as a Spanish speaker. Like there are words in Spanish that come, they give so much when you express them. And so the same goes for African languages. When you say things in Zulu, when you say things in Tswana, it has such a spice to it that I think it really connects with the funny bones inside everybody, you know. So when I perform my comedy, like when I'm in South Africa, there are things that I can say in other languages that I can't say in other parts of the world that I think are so much funnier. And so even when I try and write jokes in every single language that I'm trying to learn. So, you know, I'll tell a joke in German, and I find that in German, that joke is so much funnier than I could be in English.
You can't possibly be saying that German is funnier than English.
Telling a joke in German, I think, is much funnier than English. Just because I don't know what it is. I think English is a very boring language. Even though it's expressive, it's a very boring language, you know. And so what I do find is there are words, you know, like in German, like the word unglaublich is such a fantastic word, like unbelievable, whatever, unglaublich. You can hear that it just sounds like it. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's so many words in German that I think that connect with something in your brain that goes beyond your understanding. It's a special sound, and so I appreciate that in every language. So when I learn languages, part of the reason I learn it is because I feel like it opens up different parts of your personality and different parts of your brain that help you tap into different parts of funny and different ways of thinking.
Yeah, that's, you know, one of my favorite words in German is Warmduscher, which is it's kind of an insult. It's like you take warm showers. What a great insult! You don't have enough guts to take cold showers.
Oh man!
You know, one of the most difficult things about learning a new language is speaking it, and at a certain point you just kind of have to go for it and speak it. And you seem really good at this. I mean, even during this interview, you're just speaking just other languages that you yourself say you're not very good at. Do you think stand-up comedy has helped you with this? Do you think being able to do you think part of the reason you're so good at learning languages is because you just go for it?
I don't think so, actually. No, I think it was the other way around. I think maybe learning languages is why I got good at doing stand-up comedy. You know, I think I attribute all my language to my mom. So my mom speaks, I mean, she's out of practice now, but my mom speaks at least 9 languages. So,
wow.
You know, she always learned languages from people. She was always adamant that she was just going to learn a person's language. And she never told me why, I guess, but she just did it. And so I absorbed that from her as a child. I would always watch her speaking to people in their language. She was always adamant about that. She'd always want to learn. And the biggest thing I learned from my mom was in order to be good at learning a language, you have to lose your ego. You can't maintain ego while learning another language, because in order to learn a language, you have to be a child. And children make mistakes the entire time when they're speaking. You know, the first 5-6 years of your life, you sound like the stupidest person on earth, but you don't know that, and you shouldn't know that, because that's how you learn a language. I think one of the biggest blocks in learning languages is that as adults, we're so afraid of being stupid, and we're so afraid of seeming as if we don't know, that we're afraid to say things and get it wrong. We want to pronounce things perfectly. We want to say things perfectly, and until we can, we don't want to speak the language. And I think that's what holds us back. So when it comes to language for myself, maybe that's the part that helps me, is I'm not afraid to look like a fool. You know, I say the thing, and then people will tell me, they'll go, no, that's not how you say it. Like I remember in Brazil, I was trying to say the word for my favorite kind of, like it's a little Brazilian cheese bread, right? And they call
pão de queijo.
Yeah, pão de queijo. Pão de queijo. But then if I say it wrong, sometimes I say pão, and then it sounds like I'm saying another word, which is apparently like for like ass or a butt. And I didn't know this. So I would say pão, and then they would be like, no, pão. And I'd be like, pão. And they'd be like, no, pão. And I would just keep saying it. And they'd be like, you're running around Rio de Janeiro saying you want ass with cheese. And I was like, no, I'm trying to say like bread with cheese. And they were like, well, you got to stop saying it. I was like, I'm not going to stop. I'll just keep saying it until I get it. And in the meantime, I'll enjoy the experiences. And so I think that's the key to language, is just jumping in, enjoying the sounds of what's happening, and realizing that you're going to be an idiot. And that's, I think, another reason that language is so fun, because it humbles you. You know, in order to learn a new language, you have to humble yourself to the fact that you know nothing. Other people know more than you, and you start again as a child. And I think that's a wonderful experience.
The image, cheesy butt in Brazil, great image.
I actually, this is kind of a little off to the side. I went to South Africa, and it actually reminded me quite a bit of Guatemala. There's a lot of similarities. I mean, obviously there's very big differences, but there's a lot of similarities in just seeing so much wealth right next to so much poverty.
Yes.
And it just and the barbed wire, like this is how I grew up too. And it's this amazing thing where I don't know, it just seemed pretty similar. And in the case of South Africa, it is pretty divided by languages. It's just like Guatemala is. But do you think there are examples where language has actually helped unite people in South Africa?
Oh, definitely. I've seen a big difference. So South Africa, for those who don't know, is a country where the majority of the population was oppressed for a very, very long time because of apartheid, which was a series of laws that separated people based on the color of their skin and even the culture that they were from. Now, what made South Africa interesting is because of this separation, you now had a single country that had 11 languages that were being spoken simultaneously. And so once the country achieved democracy, we were now in a place where nobody could decide which language would become de facto. And so the country chose English, but chose that all 11 languages would become official languages of the country, which had its pros and its cons. But what I have learned and what I have seen is those in the country who have been willing to learn languages beyond their own have found connections and have found ways to communicate with people who maybe wouldn't have seen themselves as friends or as colleagues or as neighbors without that happening. And so, I've seen one of the best things that's happened in South Africa is white people who for long were told that these languages were beneath them, learning these languages. I went to school with white kids who didn't have that burden of being taught racism, luckily. And many of them have embraced African languages because they're in Africa and they speak it fluently. And to see the joy on Black people's faces in South Africa when this happens is something that I don't take for granted, because it shows that, as I said, we are of the same. Yes, we have different skin colors. Yes, we've had different life experiences, but by speaking this language, we are of the same. And so I think that's one of the most beautiful things that I have seen language can achieve is it finds a way to connect people. It can show somebody that you are trying to connect with them, as opposed to not just having them meet you where you are, especially in a position of power, especially in a position where it's always been in your favor. I think that's where language I've seen, can be really powerful in South Africa, because it ingratiates you to people. And it shows them that you don't just see them as an other, you're trying to make them and you and us.
Something I always been very curious about, because you see this in certain countries. Is it the case that in South Africa, Black people speak more languages than white people?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And this is a byproduct of colonialism. Around the world, a few countries traveled and they took over a bunch of places and they forced the people there to learn their language. They didn't really bother to try the opposite way around. And so what happened was, the curse became the gift. And that is just like in South America, just like in, all over the world, maybe even parts of Asia, you find that people learned the language of the colonizer, and then they also kept their languages, and then they had to learn languages of their fellow humans around them as well, because they had to communicate. And so out of that emerged a world where people were multilingual because they had to be. And then you find a class that had established themselves as the upper class did not understand languages, which has only come to hinder them, and I think will continue to hinder them as time goes on.
Yeah, I mean, you see that very clearly in Latin America, where the indigenous people from Latin America speak their language, also a few other indigenous languages, and also Spanish.
Exactly.
But usually the white people in Latin America, they speak Spanish only. You see that. Earlier we announced that we're going to have some upcoming language courses on Duolingo, and we're going to be including actually Zulu and Xhosa, two languages that you speak. Tell us what it means to you to see these two courses added to Duolingo.
I'm truly excited for Zulu and Xhosa as well. Xhosa because I want to start learning it and speaking it fluently, and then Zulu just so I can brush up while I'm not in my country.
Okay, well, speaking at least for Zulu, in Duolingo, we do not have insults in Duolingo because it's for all ages. In fact, people have offered to pay us money to have a whole,
skill on insults, but we don't do that. But here we can bend the rules a little bit. Can you share your favorite insult in Zulu?
Oh, wow. My favorite insult in Zulu. Do I have one? I'm trying to think if there's a favorite insult. They're all so mean. I don't even think of them as. Let me think of to be honest with you, I think my favorite insult is actually in Xhosa. And it's because my mom would always say it to me, and I think it's fantastic to say to anybody, which would be Uispanqa, which is it's an idiot, but it's like it's a special type of idiot, you know. So like my mom would say that to me, like when I was just being naughty as a little kid, she'd be like, which means you're like an idiot of a child, but like it's not idiot as in like stupidity. It's more, you know, it's like a combination of things. It's like a disaster is the best way to put it. You're a disaster of a human being, which I think is a fantastic way to insult another person. It's not just, don't insult them using their mom. Their mom did nothing to you. Don't insult them using their race. That's just lazy. Think about something creative. Them being a disaster as a human being. I think that's a fantastic insult for them.
What is it again?
Spanqa somtana. Spanqa.
Okay, I'm not even going to try that. I am not even going to try that.
Yeah, the click that's going to be interesting on Duolingo. You're going to need a whole section in Xhosa just to teach people about the clicks.
That's very hard to do. There's a few things like that in a few languages that are just very hard to do. Rolling R's in Spanish is another one that people just have a lot of trouble with.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, but that is a fantastic insult. I won't say it in Xhosa, but I will. I'll just call people disasters, which is pretty great. Going back to kind of slightly more serious topics, in your book, you discuss living between dual identities and really feeling split between different worlds. And it's a feeling that I think is pretty familiar to people who are raised multilingual and to those who are immersed in learning a new language for the first time. Do you think there are any advantages of having this split identity that you grew up with?
Definitely. I think there are disadvantages and advantages to anything. I think if you grow up in a world where there is only one language and one identity, the advantage is that you always feel at home. And the advantage is I think you can feel more secure in the world because the world is always reflecting you. I think that's fantastic. The disadvantage is that you may grow up in a world where it's a bit homogenous, where you feel like everything is supposed to be you. And then you don't understand how to accept other ideas. You don't know how to augment your brain. You don't know how to shapeshift when it's appropriate, And I think that's where the gift and the curse flips for people who are multilingual. You grow up in a world where you very inherently understand there is no one way to perceive things or to say things or to do things because multiple languages are informing you. In order to understand language, part of it is you have to understand culture. So for instance, as a Spanish speaker, you have to understand where you're going to put the gendering in each thing. Is it a he or is it a she? Just even understanding that is part of the language. When speaking German, the Spanish I think would be the same, and with French and Italian, you can't just refer to. There's multiple yous. There's the important you, there is the stranger you, there is the familial you, there is the parent you. There are so many yous that you can use. And that, I think, tells you a little bit about culture. It's like, how do we treat people? Do I respect you as somebody I don't know? Do I give a different respect to somebody I do know? Is there familiarity that's joyful? I think these are things that are important to us as human beings. And I think those are gifts that can inform us. And so if you grow up with one language, can be good, but then the downside is you're not being exposed to all of these different ideas. When you grow up with multiple languages, you always know that there's another way to say or do a thing. And I think that sticks with you as a person. It makes it harder to feel like you're ever, fixed in one place in life, but life is always moving. So I think in time that'll come to reward you in the long term.
What's your second best language if you said English is your best language?
What is my second best language? It changes. It used to be Zulu. So it depends on which best friend I'm spending the most time with. So it used to be Zulu. And then it switched dramatically to Tswana. So Tswana is I think my second best language right now. It used to be Afrikaans because of school. We spoke it so much in school. It was our second language, and you'd speak it in South Africa. So yeah, it was Afrikaans. Then it was Zulu. then it was Tswana, and I'll say now it's probably still Tswana, and then, you know, I'll see from there. Depending on, my dream is to go live in some random country, you know, in a few years, and then just make that my second language and become proficient.
Does it happen to you that do you use English words in Zulu? Do you speak like Zuluglish? I don't know, is there a name for that?
Definitely. That's the best thing you can do. You just that's, I think, the joy. That's the real joy of language. If you can get into a world where you speak with people who speak all of the languages, man, it's like, you know, it's the difference between a fruit and a fruit salad. That's what the difference is. You know, it's being able to tap into any emotion and any idea that you need at any moment. I think that's like pure joy in language. So yeah, I love that. You know, I love jumping into a language just to pick out one word or one phrase. You know, so I could be speaking to you, and in the middle of that thing, like even now when I was in Greece, you know, just learning those small little throwaway things that Greek people will do, just like ella, just like they say things and they throw it out and they have fun with small words. I think those are great things to incorporate in language, even if you're speaking one predominant language, that you can start to almost you know, to like build out your language, to fortify it into something that has a lot more character. So I love that.
Yeah, I love that too. I have a lot of people here that speak Spanish, and I am a native Spanish speaker. And here we all speak Spanglish. That's what we speak. I mean, we just, it's just half English, half Spanish. I think that's my native language now. I have a question. What language do you count in? Do you count in English?
Yeah, I count in English. It's funny enough, the one I count in, maybe just for fun sometimes, I count in German quite regularly now that you've asked me that. And
wow.
That's the most random. I didn't even think about that actually. But it'll only be for like small numbers. But yeah. Yeah, like sometimes I'll just find myself being like, 20. And I don't even know why that happened.
And apparently the language you count on and the language you pray on are important. They're kind of very, very deep in there.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Okay, I have one last question, which is, how much of your success do you attribute to luck or hard work? I mean, mainly it's kind of advice for viewers who would have the ambition to desire to lead a successful life like you have. So, you know, just generally talk about that, because I find that very interesting.
So I would attribute 80% of my success to luck, 20% to hard work. I think far too many people negate how much luck affects your life. You know, and when people think about luck, I think a lot of the time they think of things like winning the lottery. You know, that's what people think of as luck. People don't think of luck being who you're born to. This decides everything, your lot in life, where you're born. You realize that if your mother just happens to be in America, for instance, all of a sudden your life will be on a completely different trajectory after you're born because you're now an American citizen. That's crazy lucky. You know, where did your parents meet? That's lucky. Where did they get married? That's lucky. What is their citizenship? That's lucky. You know, you could be born into a war-torn region in the world. I don't care how hard you work. Your luck has determined where you're going to start in life. And so luck is a major thing in my world. I think about how lucky I am that I grew up, that I was born to a mother who was extremely progressive and always trying to grow and learn as a human being. She learned languages, so I learned languages. I was lucky. I'm lucky that my dad is Swiss, German, you know, so now here I have this different influence in my life, in my mother's life. He taught her different things that she would have never had access to had she not met him. That's luck for me. I'm lucky that my mother is part of the Xhosa tribe, you know, because Xhosa people were taught English by a lot of missionaries when the apartheid government in South Africa refused to teach English to Black people in the country. That was luck. You know, luck is the fact that apartheid ended before I had to go to school. That's lucky. I mean, if it never ended, I would have been stuck in a school where I wasn't allowed to do math or geography or science or anything. So that's luck. So all of these things are luck. You know, when does the world open? Where do you travel? The fact that I spoke English as a first language, that was luck. And so as much as people like to think that hard work is everything, yeah, that 20% is how you convert your luck into a tangible result. You know, don't get me wrong. Without that 20%, I would argue the 80% is almost worth nothing, you know, because luck is something that has to be actioned upon. People don't seem to realize that. They go, oh, you're so lucky. Yes, but you have to be somewhere. You have to show up. You have to be prepared. That's how you action the luck. And so for anybody out there, I'll always go like, please acknowledge the luck that you have, but work your ass off to turn it into something. Because if you don't, that luck is worth nothing. And so going back to the lottery ticket, you have to actually play the lottery to win it. You have to actually pick the numbers to be part of the lottery. Don't go play the lottery because the chances are you're not going to win. It's all a waste of your money. I'm just using this metaphorically. I'm just saying in life, you cannot win if you don't play the lottery. In real life, you cannot win the lottery if you play, for most people. So maybe this is not the best metaphor, but I think people understand what I'm saying.
Well, Trevor Noah, thank you so much for being with us here. It's been a true honor, certainly for me. I'm a humongous fan of everything you've done. Certainly a humongous fan of The Daily Show. So thank you for spending time with us.
And thank you very much, Luis. Muchas gracias. Thank you for taking the time. And to everybody that works at Duolingo, Nikenzan Gofu, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate you. Dankeschön to everyone who set up those first courses. I appreciate that. And muito obrigado to the real speakers out there. I see you.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for DuoCon 2021. I hope you enjoyed the show and that you're feeling smarter than you were when you sat down. Oh, I just wanted to mention something that didn't come up in the interview. Duolingo have been working with Trevor Noah's foundation and another nonprofit called Nali Bali to develop those upcoming Zulu and Xhosa courses, and they'll be coming to the Learning app in 2022. And when those courses launch, the Duolingo app will be exempt from data charges for Vodacom customers in South Africa. You hear that, Verizon? Last thing. Look out for an email survey after the stream, and as a reward for completing it, Duolingo will be gifting a month of Duolingo Plus for gratis. That means free in Spanish. See? That 216-day streak is really paying off. We hope to see everybody in person next year in New York. Be safe out there. Now, if you'll excuse me, they're about to screen the Muppets version of Taxi Driver. Bye.